How the devil is everyone? How are we all? Good evening, happy Monday. Yeah, smash that like button, mofos. We happy few, we band of brothers and sisters. Suzanne was the first here. We should really have a prize for the first in chat, right? Always good to see Muppets. Helen is here for 6 to 9 minutes. Hopefully we can reach 9 minutes, or maybe even double digits. Jamie is here. Jamie, the fountain of knowledge on this case. And Black Eagle is here. So this is really going to be a part 2, I guess, to the previous live. Let me just show my screen. Is anyone Adelson out yet? Because I am down the rabbit hole in this one, guys. But I think I will start jumping into a few other cases as well for a bit of variety. I think even I'm at risk of being Adelsoned out at some point. Although I don't predict that. You're awesome, Jamie. I like the preemptive likes. That's what it's all about. So last time we got, I've already gone through the first trial. In order to, I'm focusing on the testimony of Wendy and Jeffrey, as I've said. So I've done the first trial. We've gone through the testimony of both of them through that. And then I got halfway through the second trial, which was the retrial of Katherine Magbanua in 2022. But we got halfway through that. We didn't get to Jeffrey's testimony yet. And there's another 20 minutes or so of Wendy's testimony to go through. So I'm going to be showing those two tonight. I won't be tired of the Adelsons case till Wicked Wendy is in prison. Yeah, were you not thinking about moving to Tallahassee, Jamie, to try and get on the jury? That'd be dedication. So I was trying to watch the pre-trial conference of Donna Adelson earlier, but there was a problem with the audio. I was watching it on Mentor Lawyer. I managed to catch it on another channel. So we have the trial day of September the 30th this year for Donna. So we have that confirmed. I think July the 22nd for a status hearing. Hey, Tracy. It's a spicy case for sure, right? This tree is like some Goliathan tree with so many branches. But what's underneath the soil is crazy. I got a comment on a previous video which just reminds myself of how many branches there are to this case, which I'm going to address in a bit. Some pushback in regards to my take on Jeff Lacasse. Hey Jenny, drive safely. Yeah, Donna's never getting out of jail. Tracy. Unfortunately, Donna's, well, Donna's gonna die in jail. It's over. Jamie's looking into jury residency requirements. I love it. So yes, indeed. Donna will be going to trial September the 30th. Oh, Tracy, there is no chance that there's anything other than a guilty verdict coming for Donna. Write that down. I think it is a suicide suit. Funny you bring that up. She was apparently planning suicide, Donna. Um, and this was related through what came out through one of the state attorneys, I think, after she was arrested. Let me just read out an article on that point. So this is from Crime Online. I think this is a relatively recent article, well, a couple of months ago. Florida mother Donna Adelson engaged in several conversations with her son before her arrest. So remember that Donna was arrested not long after the verdict for Charlie, her son. November the 13th, Donna was arrested at Miami International Airport. This was actually before Charlie had been sentenced, right? So she engaged in several conversations with her son before her arrest, even continuing to talk for minutes after one of the calls disconnected. According to jail calls obtained by the Tallahassee Democrat, Donna can be heard talking to her son Charles during a 25-minute call from the Leon County Detention Facility, where he was jailed on the murder charges. It was one of numerous calls, but during this particular call, she appeared to be talking to her son, despite the call being disconnected. During the call, Donna made comments about possibly taking her own life and spoke about a text message from her daughter, Wendy. The call took place on November the 7th, shortly after Charles was convicted of murdering his brother-in-law, Dan Markel. So about a week after Charles was convicted, Donna was arrested, and then his sentence came a few days later. Can you hear me, Charlie? She asks. Expletive. You can't hear me again, right? Charlie, Charlie. He never responded, but the jail call recording continued. Am I suicidal? She added, presumably talking to her husband face to face in the background. No. Do I want to go to sleep and not see my son? I do. Perfectly honest, I do. We could do it together. Leave a note. They'll know when to come get us, and we'll do it together. So she was contemplating the option of suicide with Harvey, her husband. In all, mother and son reportedly had over 35 hours of jail conversations. You're going to be okay, Donna told her son in a call before his conviction, following his complaints about being in jail. You're going to get out of that stupid room. Once you do, you'll start to feel a little bit better, I know that. Donna's now facing murder charges herself. Dan Markel, identified as a renowned law professor at FSU, was fatally shot while walking into the garage. Well, he was in his car in his garage. Charles Adelson hired his former girlfriend, Katie Magbanua, to kill Markel after his sister Wendy lost a bitter custody battle with the victim. Magbanua subsequently hired Sigfrido Garcia, her former lover, who is the father of her children, and his friend Luis Rivera to carry out the hit. Wendy, who denies any involvement, is not facing charges. Shared custody of her children with Markel. She wanted to move from Tallahassee to South Florida to be closer to her family. Okay, we all know this. She was arrested at Miami International November 13th as she and her husband Harvey were preparing to board a one-way flight to Vietnam. They attempted to flee a week after a jury found Charles guilty. She's now charged with first-degree murder, conspiracy, and solicitation in the murder-for-hire killing. Her attorney requested Adelson, or her attorney at the time requested that Adelson be taken out of solitary confinement or, as an alternative, placed under house arrest. He outlined various concerns, including Adelson reportedly sitting naked on a mattress on the floor and being forced to eat with her hands. The judge ultimately rejected this request and ordered her to undergo an independent psychological evaluation. The evaluation is designed to move her off suicide watch. Hey, kindness cake. I've heard a few people say that same thing, Black Eagle. Narcissists do not off themselves. You know, I was reading out that entire article thinking that you guys could see it. Sorry about that. So before I get into what I want to talk about, what I want to show, I just want to mention, and this is something that I've brought up before in regards to this attempt to be as objective as possible in true crime, which is not always easy, right? Sometimes there's uncomfortable observations that we might come to. But it is the case that how long has she been in jail? She's been in jail since November the 13th. So, what, 4 months? So it is the case that in Jeffrey's first interview, which was, from what I remember, what, 3, 4 days after the murder, just as he returned from his trip down to Tennessee, he did not paint a great picture of Dan Markel. Now, clearly, a lot of that would be due to Wendy, right? His perception would be skewed through that. But he also did reflect from his own experience of Dan. He had met Dan a few times, so he referred to his negative interpretation of Dan through him meeting him. And that did evolve as his interviews continued. He had another 2 interviews a few days later and then a few months later. And he obviously started to realize that Dan perhaps was not the person that he thought he was. But as I say, I did get some pushback in terms of my take on Jeff, because I think he's extremely believable But I get the impression that there are people out there that have a negative view of Jeff, um, laying claims that perhaps he knew even to the extent that he perhaps knew more of the plan all along, and that this was all just his revenge because he was heartbroken over Wendy, which is kind of interesting because you can even see from Jeff's interview that he's worried about that perception, right, of being the jilted boyfriend. And I've heard claims that he was not consistent in his interviews. I didn't see that at all. I think he was very consistent. But it is something I want to look into, and this is one of these other branches that are under the soil that I've just not had a chance to delve into yet. But I want to see where this is coming from, because there is a proportion of people out there that don't seem to like Jeff. And you're always going to get, in any true crime case, people on each side of things, no matter how damning the case is in one respect or the other. It's always going to happen, right? But I still want to look into it. Yeah, Sarah, I screwed up earlier when I scheduled this. I scheduled it for 24 hours ahead. That's exactly how he comes across to me, Jimmy. Yeah, he's intuitive, smart, decent man. He's dealt with this for almost 10 years. I think he is a hero. I think his interviews and his testimony have played a huge part in holding some of these people accountable. I think he's extremely believable. But some of the things that I've heard said about him are very hard to believe. But I'm definitely going to look into it. And the next time I do want to play a little portion of Jeff's interview when he is relating to his experience of Dan at that point. But you have to hear it through the context of the situation at the time. But if there's stuff out there, then I want to look into it. And what's also crucial is the interview from Tamara Demko that I played a few lives ago, which so aligns with the experience that Jeff relates through all these interviews. It just cannot be ignored. Sarah says, I agree. I've listened to him on various channels, and my impression is, as a clinician, he is very self-aware, pays attention to his body and what it communicates. He was spot on. Yeah, I'm. I just cannot believe some of the stuff I'm reading. You get a very good idea of Jeff through his interviews and through all his testimony. He's testified at all three trials. Um, we've heard him through his interview. He's consistent to me, extremely believable and very intuitive, like Sarah says, like Jamie says. Black Eagle says Jeff definitely will be Wendy's undoing if she goes to trial. Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Actually, just before we jump into this, let's run a quick poll. Who, and please be honest in this, who believes that Wendy will be arrested? Because this is by no means clear cut. Let me put this in chat. I'm all about polls these days. Hey, Welsh lady. Okay, I do want to get into this because there is another channel, Carl Steinberg, who I'm sure a lot of you guys that are interested in this case must have watched. He's doing a reaction to the pre-trial of Donna today, and he's starting in a couple of hours, and I want to watch that myself. So I think I'll be able to squeeze in what I want to show here before that. As I say, this is really a part two to the previous live. We're gonna just watch the end of Wendy's testimony, and then I want to contrast it with Jeff's. But I'm interested to see what you guys think in regards to that poll. Because I think it'll be pretty 50-50, right?
Calls Wendy Adelson.
So let's just remind ourselves, I'll just play the very end of her first examination by Georgia Kaplan here.
His paternal side.
It was a tribute to both families.
Did you drop it?
I did. I lost an honor to both families that day, yes.
Oh, I want to hear that, Sarah. You heard something interesting about what Wendy said in the police car when they picked her up to question her. She said before she was told something happened to Dan that she knew she was a suspect as the ex-wife. She said this in the interview, right, as well, that she thought she was a suspect when she was in the car, in the police car. I'd love to know what she was told prior to her saying that, because that's very weird. She did, Jamie.
Do you want the culpable parties in this murder held accountable?
Absolutely.
And even if it involves your own family?
Absolutely.
Do you recall giving an interview with law enforcement on the day that your husband, ex-husband, was murdered?
I recall sitting with law enforcement for 6 hours. Yes, I recall.
And did you tell law enforcement something different in that interview about the culpability of your family?
I'm sure while I sat for 6 hours completely traumatized that I said all kinds of things.
All right, and was one of the things you said while you sat for 6 hours completely traumatized that you wanted the culpable parties held accountable unless it was your family?
I don't believe I phrased it like that, and I think you're taking my words out of context.
Don't you just love the sarcasm from Georgia? I love it. You can sense it's a little personal for her. She's disgusted by this woman. Hey, 3 cents.
But sure.
But sure?
But sure what?
No further questions.
All right, we're going to take our break now. So it'll be about a 10-15 minute break, allow you to stretch your legs, use the facilities, and so the deputy will take you back. Remember, no discussion about the case or any testimony that you've heard. Please be seated. We're ready to continue with the testimony. Ms. Kappelman, you may continue with your direct if necessary.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Adelson, I'm going to approach you with what I've marked as State's Exhibit 64.
That's Carl Steinbeck's live Lincoln chat, guys. That's on in a couple of hours.
I did.
And as part of our pre-trial preparations, were you asked to listen to those calls and verify whether or not you could authenticate some of the voices on those calls?
So I was asked not to listen to the whole call, but just to listen to a few seconds, enough to be able to identify the people speaking on the calls.
And is that what you did?
That is what I did.
All right. And is State's Exhibit 64 a...
Yeah, he is interesting. I mean, he's clearly an unapologetic advocate in every sense of the word, right, for Dan Markel. But he knows what he's talking about. He's an attorney, for God's sake, and he's great with he's really great at communicating the information, I think. This is the type of thing Wendy does that reminds me of Jodi Arias. Yeah, I said that the other day. There are parts of her personality and on the stand that remind me of Jodi. I think she was, to some extent, trying to take on Georgia, the way that Jodie did.
Fair and accurate recording of where your initials appear, that representing that you could authenticate the voices on that particular call.
That is correct.
Okay, so for example, the list includes call A on State's Exhibit 99, and you've initialed here indicating that the call is from Donna Adelson to Charlie Adelson.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Judge, at this time, I'd ask to move into evidence State 64.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Be admitted as State's Exhibit 64.
No other questions. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Thank you. Ms. Adelson, this is all about you, isn't it?
You're going to find this interesting as well. It's a kind of unique situation where she's, in essence, really being cross-examined by both sides. Just the way that this trial is played out.
Excuse me?
This is all about you, right?
I was called to be a witness and I'm testifying, so I don't understand the question. Is it a question?
There's about 100 people in this courtroom, right?
There are people in the courtroom.
Possibly thousands watching, right?
I have no idea who's watching.
And it's all because of your failed marriage, right?
I disagree with that.
You disagree that your ex-husband is dead because of your family.
Yes, I disagree.
These jurors are here for weeks doing their civic duty because of your marriage, right?
No.
Katie's going through this ordeal because of that marriage, right?
No.
Dan
Isn't
Martell's
she?
parents are
Very
going through
cocky.
absolute misery because of your failed marriage. Isn't that right?
No, that's incorrect.
Well, let's talk about the marriage. You and Professor Markell, you met when you were in law school. You told that to Miss Kaplan. And it was a whirlwind romance, right? Right?
And by the way, guys, I know not everyone's up on all the details of this case. If anyone has any questions that they can think of or anything they're unclear about, fire them in chat and I'll try my best to answer them.
It was not a whirlwind romance, no.
It led to a wedding, February 26th of 2006. You had a big wedding in Boca Raton, right?
Wendy clearly never loved Dan, right? This was a very material marriage. It's obvious from everything we've heard, all the testimony from her friends and from others.
Did we get married on February 26, 2006? Is that the question? Yes.
In Boca Raton.
In Boca Raton,
And it was a very material murder.
Florida.
And it wasn't a small wedding, it was a big wedding.
There were many people in attendance.
All right, in this marriage, it led to 2 children, right? Your 2 boys.
Are you asking me if I have 2 boys?
Yes.
Yes.
And Professor Markell, he was a great father, wasn't he?
He was a very good father, yes.
Those boys were his world, right?
As well as his work, yes.
And they adored him too, didn't they?
Absolutely.
Now, this marriage started to fall apart, right?
It did.
But there were problems from the very beginning, weren't there? Right?
Are you asking me, what is the very beginning? The very beginning of when we got married?
Literally at the wedding.
There were problems before we got married.
All right, so at the wedding, and the government asked you about kosher law, right?
About what, I'm sorry?
Keeping kosher,
About
Kosher.
keeping kosher, yes.
right?
The government
And your
asked.
wedding, at your wedding, was the groom's family, the Markell family, and they are more strict than your family and friends about keeping kosher.
They do not keep kosher.
Wasn't that one of the problems in your marriage, that Professor Markell was very insistent about keeping kosher?
About his kosher rules, but those are different than his family's.
So you're saying that it wasn't a problem at the wedding, that there were people from the groom's side of the family that were there that strictly keep kosher, that they were told that it was going to be kosher food, but it actually wasn't?
So there was a misunderstanding about whether the food was going to be kosher style or more in adherence with kosher law. There was a miscommunication about that.
So
that
you had
happened.
people that strictly keep kosher eating non-kosher food, which is a big deal.
That actually is not what happened. Danny was upset that it was kosher style and not strictly adhering to kosher law. So he was disappointed.
So there's problems right from the beginning.
That was a problem at our wedding, yeah.
Fast forward now to September 10th, 2012. Professor Markell, he's away on a business trip, right?
Yes.
He's in New York City at New York University, right?
I believe so, yes.
And he's doing a presentation.
I don't know what he was doing.
Your husband at the time was in New York to give a presentation. You knew that, right?
I knew he was in New York. I didn't know if he was attending a conference or giving a presentation, but he was in New York for work.
Now, you had not communicated with him for 2 days.
I really don't remember.
You text him at around 2:30 in the afternoon, right? Right before he's about to do the presentation.
I really don't remember.
But you do remember dropping the bomb on him, don't you? Telling him that you wanted a divorce.
So I did not drop a bomb on him. We'd been in therapy for several months beforehand where I'd told him several times I wanted a divorce.
You say it's not a bomb, but you agree with me that he begged you to reconsider.
He was very upset and, yes, wanted me to reconsider, but...
So Jamie says that Detective Isom said in an interview he didn't tell her why they picked her up. Wow. Her wondering about being a suspect is revealing. Suspected of what? Yeah. I mean, it's already so damning and suspicious that she did nothing to check on her kids or on Dan himself after she drove up to the crime scene. And from what we understand, didn't show concern for her kids en route to the police station. And not for the first, 20, 30 minutes of the actual law enforcement interview. But her suggesting that she thought she was a suspect. Wow. Interesting.
In that phone call, he's begging you to reconsider. Please don't leave. Please don't break up our family, right?
He was very upset, yes.
And he was heartbroken. I mean, upset indicates that there was anger. What he was heartbroken, right?
That I decided to divorce him after telling him I would, yes.
Despite being at NYU for a presentation, he rushes home. He gets on the next flight, right?
I honestly don't remember if he got on the next flight, but he did come home quickly.
Yeah, so Dan described this as a Pearl Harbor divorce. The preemptiveness of the way that Wendy separated from him. It was very planned out, clearly. Tamara speaks about the fact that Wendy's book, which was published September 2011, which is 10 months before the separation, 10 months before what the defense attorney here is describing. She, in her dedications in the book, there's no mention of Dan. And Tamara thought that this was really weird at the time. She described herself living in Florida with her 2 kids. And there's the fact that this book mirrors so much of what came to pass in this case. She'd already started taking single parent courses. She removed most of the furniture from the home. Took hundreds of thousands of dollars from a safe, apparently. Took one of Dan's family heirlooms and stole something else, I think, never to give them back. Moved with the kids and never told Dan where they were. It was very much like the Japanese preempting the Americans by trying to destroy their fleet. She did indeed, kindness cake, yeah. Yeah, do people know what kosher is, yeah? It's a cultural, religious way of preparing food. in the way that the animals are killed and such like. Jamie says, to strictly kosher Jews, there is no such thing as kosher style. Oh, I see what you mean, the kosher style phrase, right? There's either kosher or there's not kosher, is the point, I think, right? Right, the fake blue eyes. One of the first things that Wendy said in her interview, right after she was told that Dan had been killed, was her relating to the fact that she drove halfway up Trescott Drive and then went to get her bullet bourbon round the corner from Dan's, and the guy selling the bourbon to her complimented her on how blue her eyes were. And it's just quite eerie that this book, which had already, I presume that this is not a new cover or anything. I presume that this is the cover from the time with the exaggerated blue eye. It's very creepy. Yeah, left the divorce papers on the bed. Half the furniture gone for the house, and Dan was devastated by this. Dan begged her, apparently, that he would do anything to keep the marriage going. I think he was prepared to go down to South Florida even.
2:30, he finds out in New York. By 11 p.m., he's
Hey, Red Eye.
walking in the door to your old house at Trescott Drive, right?
I don't know.
But you do know that when he walks in the house, what he finds. You know that, right?
Yes, I left him the papers.
You left the divorce papers on the bed, right?
Yes.
Half the furniture was gone.
Half the furniture was not gone.
A good amount of his stuff was gone.
Nothing of his was gone.
The boys' stuff was gone, right?
Some of the boys' things were gone. I'd taken enough so that I had for the boys, but no.
You were gone,
I was gone, yes.
and so were his boys.
His boys were not gone. He saw them the next day, and they would not have been awake if he's coming home at 11 p.m.
Let's stay on topic here.
I'd love to stay on topic.
When he walks
He may have seen the boys the next day, but he didn't know where they were staying, Wendy, did he?
in the door, the boys are not in the house, right?
Correct.
And you did not tell Professor Markel where you were taking the boys. He may have seen them the next day, but you did not let him know where you were going to be staying with his boys.
With our boys? Yes.
So you agree with me that they're also his.
Of course they're his.
And he should be entitled to know where his wife is taking his children.
Absolutely.
That's not all you took, is it?
Excuse me?
You two had a joint checking account at Schwab, right?
We did.
And you went into that account before you dropped the bomb, and you took out half of that account, right?
Correct.
Roughly $350,000.
Half, yes. Of our joint account.
$350,000.
I don't remember the amount, but yes.
You know that it was in the hundreds of thousands.
I really don't remember the amount, sir.
Is it that insignificant of a sum to you that you
I'm
don't
not saying
remember?
it's an insignificant sum. I'm saying I can't attest to the amount that was there.
I'm going to tone it down now. You were unhappy in the marriage, right?
That's why I got divorced, yes.
And it happens. Marriages fall apart, right?
Yes.
But you complained constantly about it, didn't you?
No, I don't think I complained constantly.
To anyone that would listen.
No, that's not true.
You agree with me that you complained to the one person that would actually do something about it.
I don't understand what you're asking.
Your big brother, Charles Adelson, you complained to him about how bad Professor Markel was and how much you hated him and didn't want to be in a marriage with him.
I definitely talked to my brother about how unhappy I was in my marriage. If that's the question, then yes. Is that the question?
Yes, that is a question. You talked to your brother, Charles Adelson, about how bad your marriage was.
I did, yes.
Let's talk about it. Government asked you.
It's funny you bring that up, Kindness Cake. When we were watching the first half of this testimony on the previous live, there was a really interesting segment where she is asked directly, were you involved in Dan's murder? She says the correct words, but her head nods yes. And it happens a few times. There's a few questions in sequence where she does this. Now, of course, you don't want to put too much into body language in isolation, but it's damn interesting. I'm going to put out a short clip, I think, just of that part. you know, because it's potential leakage. You put that along with everything else, and it's interesting to see.
About Charles Adelson. He's an intelligent guy, right?
He is smart.
Yeah. He's both book smart and street smart, right?
I would say so.
You would say that he's a talker.
He does like to talk.
He's got the gift of gab, so to speak.
I wouldn't say he's the gift of gab, but he does talk.
He knows what to say in the moment.
I wouldn't say that's true either.
You would say, though, that he is. Now, you were asked questions about, drug purchasing and stuff like that. You'd agree with me that he's also street smart.
I mean, I think he has common sense.
And that he lives life to a certain extent on both sides of the track. During the day, he's doing periodontal work, whatever that is, crowns, root canals, whatever that is. He's doing that during the day. At night, he's out with friends, he's buying drugs. He's living life on both sides of the track.
I don't know about that he's out buying drugs.
Now, let's talk for a second about WhatsApp. And as an aside here for a second, the government asked you the question if you used WhatsApp, right? You remember that?
I remember them asking me, yes.
On the day that Professor Markel was killed, you went in for the interview, right?
I talked to the police.
And you also gave them your phone for them to inspect.
Absolutely.
All right. So the determination of what, if any, WhatsApp was being used.
Oh, now this is interesting. I keep hearing rumblings about WhatsApp and possibly Snapchat as being potentially problematic for Wendy down the line.
They would have from the download they did that day of your phone.
Sure.
Now, would you be surprised to learn that your brother used WhatsApp?
No.
You would agree with me that WhatsApp, and you explained it well, is end-to-end encryption. Correct. In your lay opinion, if you can explain to the jurors, just in case they don't know, what that means.
I know that it's something we use at my work because essentially it has the ability to keep things more private. I also know that nothing's actually private and that anyone who wants to can uncode the messages. So that's what we tell people at our work.
So the thought is with WhatsApp, if I use my phone and I call somebody, the call could be listened to. If I text somebody, it's recordable, right?
I think so.
But with WhatsApp, you can send messages or have phone calls where there's no record of it.
I don't think that's true. I think there is still a record of it.
But the belief and the thought, I'll withdraw that question. Your lay understanding, though, is that the footprint that it leaves is much less than that of normal communications.
I think it's different, but I think it still leaves a digital footprint that's easily uncodable.
If you were to send a WhatsApp message to Ms. Kappelman, it would show that a message was sent, but it would be hard to get what the content of the message is.
I don't think that's true.
All right. Let's talk about your brother's jokes now. You don't deny that he joked about hiring a hitman.
He did.
You don't deny that he repeated this joke.
He did.
And he made this joke right before a hitman murdered Professor Markel.
I don't know that to be true.
Okay. He made the joke right before, and I'll leave out the hitman part, Professor Markel was killed.
He made the joke the morning that I talked to him. Yeah.
Can you think of one person in this world that would actually hire two people to go kill Professor Markel other than your family?
Your Honor.
Ms. Adelson, please answer. Please address me and answer the question.
It calls for an unbelievable amount of speculation. I mean, I'm responsible for coming up with. That's the prosecutor's duty, no, to figure out who's responsible.
You just said a moment ago that you disagree that hitman killed Professor Markel. That's what you said, right? So my question to you is, if you're able to say, well, it wasn't hitman, then who? Tell this jury. Who on this planet would have wanted to kill Professor Markel?
I have no idea.
All right. Let's get into that a little bit. But I want to make sure that's clear. This joke is made right before Professor Markel is murdered, right?
The joke was made many times.
It was made right before Professor Markel was murdered. Yes or no?
Yes.
July 18, 2014, you're interviewed, and you make a statement saying, I knew this would happen. You said that, right?
I did.
All right. Now I want to talk about your knowledge and your belief on this. You're a smart person, right?
How am I supposed to answer that?
Well, let's go through your resume. You went to Brandeis University, right?
I did.
You graduated magna cum laude.
I did.
If you could explain to the jury what that means.
It means I studied a lot and got good grades.
All right. It means, and to speak, I'm from the Northeast. My Boston accent may give it away. It means you're wicked smart, right?
That's very
You had a
nice.
high
Thank
GPA,
you.
a very high GPA.
I work hard.
You also went and you got a master's degree from the University of
Leave out the phony modesty all of a sudden, Wendy, please.
Cambridge.
I did.
You were a Gates Scholar.
I was.
You then go to the University of Miami School of Law, which is a top-tier law school, Tier 1, right?
Okay.
Right? We're talking about your level of intelligence. You went to the University of Miami Law School, right?
I did, yes.
You also clerked at the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, right?
I did.
Now, to get a clerkship out of law school, it's a very difficult thing to do, right?
It's challenging.
You have to have top grades. You have to go through a rigorous selection process, right?
Yes.
You then become a professor at the Florida State University College of Law, right?
Yes.
You're also a published author, right?
Now you're just embarrassing me.
Why are you embarrassed that you're...
What the fuck? Is she trying to flirt with the defense attorney? Oh, God, she's so strange.
a published author?
I don't like talking about myself.
Is it because the book that you wrote discredited Tallahassee and spoke ill of it?
The book did not discredit Tallahassee. It wasn't about Tallahassee.
Let's stay on topic and ask the question again with everything that we just went through. You're a smart woman, right?
I am a smart woman.
There's information about this case everywhere. You'd agree with me on that, right?
I'd been advised by my lawyer not to read it.
All right. Now, we're not talking about reading stuff. There's podcasts,
Also not to listen.
TV shows,
Also not to watch.
articles.
Don't read.
And so
Yes, Red Eye, I say this all the time. True crime at its best is like a mirror that we can peer into back at society, because you will come across people like this in everyday life. They just don't kill people.
you've made the decision. Now, you're a lawyer yourself too, right?
I am.
And you made the decision, I'm not going to look at any of this stuff.
Correct.
I don't want to know what happened to the father of my two children.
Not I don't want to know what happened.
How can you say you love those
Yes, Suzanne and Sarah, I'd pay damn good money to see Juan Martinez cross-examine Wendy. Damn good money.
boys if you don't care who killed the father that they loved?
Of course I care who killed the father that they loved.
Then why won't you look at the stuff?
I've been advised not to.
Are you afraid that when you look at it, you're going to realize that your brother did this?
I am not afraid of that.
Now, of course, you've, and we won't get into privileged communications, but you've spoken to your lawyer about the case.
How are we not getting into privileged communications? Yes, I've spoken to my lawyer about the case.
You're very intelligent. You have one of the top defense attorneys in the country, a former federal prosecutor, John Lohr, right there in the blue suit, right?
He is my attorney.
You're telling me with all of this at your disposal, your intelligence, his experience, and all this information, that you don't care to find out who it is that killed Professor Markell?
This is not that I don't care to find out. My job is to take care of those boys, and that is what I do. I don't see how it helps take care of them to go reading and watching and soaking up all of the horrible information that's out there.
How about holding the killers of your kid's father accountable? Like, does that not enter into the picture, Wendy? Wendy did literally zero to help in any way with the investigation into Dan's killers.
There.
You don't realize that you could be helpful in finally untangling this to give this jury the truth about what happened to Professor Markell?
I have been nothing but helpful since this started.
To what happened to their son? By you looking at it, you are at the center of all this, but you won't look at anything to help in the process.
I've done nothing but help in this process.
You came here and testified.
I came here and testified. I spoke to the police for
Subpoenaed. She tried not to testify.
6 hours without anyone present. I signed over my cell phone, my car, my house, everything, my computer. What else do I have or know that you haven't seen?
You came here because you were subpoenaed and had no choice,
Correct.
right?
This is not fun. I would not do this by choice.
You've been
Correct. Indeed, correct, yeah. But you've done everything you possibly can to help find the killers of your ex-husband, right? Never mind that you moved down to South Florida 2 or 3 days after the actual murder, right?
inconvenienced.
I've not been inconvenienced.
Professor Markel was shot in the head.
I'm not complaining about being here. This is my duty. I'm here.
The prosecution subpoenaed her, Tracy, and then again for Charlie's trial.
We'll get back to you complaining about being here. Do you honestly expect this jury to believe that you haven't confronted your brother about all of this?
Yes, I do.
Yes, you did confront him?
Yes, I do expect them to believe that I did not confront my brother because I didn't.
Or maybe you don't need to because you know the truth in this case. You already know it. That he went behind your back, right?
Did not happen.
Just like he has done with past boyfriends. He's done that in the past where he's gone behind your back when you were having problems in a relationship and dealt with it himself.
No.
Miss Adelson, you understand that until you expose your brother what he did, that everybody's going to consider you as guilty.
Yeah, Pussycat, that is literally word for word true. She acted like he didn't exist. And God only knows what those kids are going to go through in the aftermath of all this, right? God only knows what reality that they were living under. What reality they thought was real. And I said this in the last live, if Wendy gets away with this, then her ultimate punishment may well be coming from her own kids, who are now teenagers, that cannot be shielded from the real reality in all this. And it's hard to believe that they're not eventually going to see the obvious, not just in the family, but in Wendy. And that may well be her ultimate punishment. I hope it's in prison, but there is consolation in that, perhaps.
You understand that, right?
What is the question that you're asking me?
You understand that until you expose your brother and explain what he did, that he went behind everybody's back, that he hired a hitman to murder your ex-husband, you'll remain guilty in the eyes of the world.
I can't speak to the eyes of the world. I can only know that I have done nothing wrong.
Or maybe you are guilty.
I am not guilty.
So, a witness in this case, and I'm not going to get into their testimony, but one of the hitmen, the convicted hitman, implicates you. On July 17, 2014, the day before the murder.
Yeah, Mikhail says she probably will get away with it unless they have more evidence that they haven't shown yet. Yeah. I think even with what we have already as public knowledge, that you can make a very good case on all the circumstantial evidence, notwithstanding the fact that there is no smoking gun. The closest thing to a smoking gun for Wendy, I think, is her actions on the day that he was murdered. It would have to be a case of collating all the circumstantial evidence, all the red flags, all the behavior of Wendy that defies common sense for her to be innocent of having no knowledge of this hit. But what we also have to think about is she has been named an unindicted conspirator, right? Surely they have more evidence, or have obtained more evidence since they got Donna and Harvey's devices. And perhaps, we keep hearing about WhatsApp, Snapchat, perhaps. that there's more in the back pocket that Georgia and Sarah Duggan have. But you have to believe if they can just get her in front of a jury. I mean, I am obviously biased. I'm certain she's guilty. But it's hard to imagine a jury believing her, right? I know that's not everything. Well, it is, but they have to be convinced by the prosecution. But in terms of her likability and believability in front of a jury, that's not going to go well for her. Let me just go back 30 seconds. Kindness Cake says she looked slightly rattled then, just for a second. I want to see that again. Yeah, Jamie, Georgia is too smart to show her cards. Is statement analysis not permitted as evidence in court? I don't think it is, Red Eye. No. Statement analysis has become a huge aid to law enforcement, but more in terms of where to look, who to look at. But I don't, it's a little bit like polygraphs. They're useful in terms of trying to get information out of suspects, to use it as a tool, as a bargaining tool, and to help them in terms of where to focus. But I don't think it's, as of yet, admissible in court, statement analysis.
Everybody's going to consider you as guilty. You understand that, right?
What is the question that you're asking me?
You understand that until you expose your brother and explain what he did, that he went behind everybody's back, that he hired a hitman to murder your ex-husband, you'll remain guilty in the eyes of the world.
I can't speak to the eyes of the world. I can only know that I have done nothing wrong.
Or maybe you are guilty.
I am not guilty.
So, a witness in this case, and I'm not going to get into their
Yeah, I could see that there, Kindness Cake. Yeah, there was a bit of a shift in her eyes there. Definitely, possibly rattled.
man to murder your ex-husband, you'll remain guilty in the eyes of the world.
I can't speak to the eyes of the world. I can only know that I have done nothing wrong.
Or maybe you are guilty.
I am not guilty.
So, a witness in this case, and I'm not going to get into their testimony, but one of the hitmen, the convicted hitman, implicates you. On July 17, 2014, the day before the murder, the morning before, he says that you were walking on Trescott with the two boys, that you walked down the driveway and into the house.
That never happened.
Right, because Professor Markell, he had the kids. Based on the way that your guy's schedule was, on that day he would have had the children in the morning, and you're going through such a bad divorce, you wouldn't be at his house, right?
I wouldn't be at his house anyway, but not because we were going through a bad divorce. At that time, things were pretty copacetic.
All right, so we're coming back to maybe you do know, or maybe you were involved.
Excuse me? What's the question that you're asking me?
I'm giving you a header of what we're talking about so that it will ease you in the question, okay? I'm just telling you what the topic that we're on, so we'll get to a question. Now, the government asked you about a time that you met Miss Magbanua. It was actually spring break of March 2014, right?
I believe so.
You went down to Miami. You stayed with your brother.
I really like Pat Brown as well, Red Eye. She's great.
Charles.
I went down to Fort Lauderdale after being in Immokalee and stayed with my brother.
You then went to Miami Beach to Yardbird and had dinner outside with your boyfriend at the time, or who you were dating, Jeffrey Lacasse. Katherine Magbanua was there, and your brother Charles Adelson, and you all ate outside, right?
We did.
And that's on Miami Beach, not in Fort Lauderdale.
Correct.
Now, just for context, Jeffrey Lacasse, he was also an FSU professor, not at the law school, but an FSU professor. Nice guy, right?
I don't think so now.
Yeah.
You wouldn't really be laughing jovially about it if you really believed that he really was trying to get, because if she's innocent, she has to believe that Jeff is trying to bury her as revenge, right, for breaking his heart. So you wouldn't be laughing jovially about it, would you?
You deny, I'm assuming, that on July 13, 2014, you told Jeffrey Lacasse that Charles looked into hiring a hitman. You deny that, or you admit that?
I deny that.
And that you told him that Charles looked into hiring a hitman back in September of 2013.
That never happened.
Which would have been months before your brother even met Katherine Magbanua.
I don't remember when they met.
Letting you know the topic we're on, we're talking about you being involved. That same week, earlier in the week, you sent an email. We're talking about the week of the murder now, not spring break, the week of the murder, not Yardbird, the week of the murder. You sent an email to Jeffrey Lacasse saying that you wanted to break up, that you needed space, right?
I did.
Sent him a long email, stay away, we're broken up, right?
I did.
You knew that on July 18, 2014, Jeffrey Lacasse was leaving town to go on a trip, right?
I knew he was leaving at some point that week. I don't remember when.
You knew that he was leaving on the same day of the murder, at the same exact time as the murder.
I don't think I did.
11 a.m. on July 18, 2014.
I don't think I knew when he was leaving town.
It's a
Just watch how long she maintains that head nod there. You know how people point out that liars will always over-explain with their lies. They'll give every detail they possibly can to try and diffuse the actual truth, right? Well, there might be something similar going on with Wendy here, with this exaggerated nod no.
that you needed space, right?
I did.
Sent him a long email, stay away, we're broken up, right?
I did.
You knew that on July 18, 2014, Jeffrey Lacasse was leaving town to go on a trip, right?
I knew he was leaving at some point that week. I don't remember when.
You knew that he was leaving on the same day of the murder, at the same exact time as the murder.
I don't think I did.
11 a.m. on July 18, 2014.
I don't think I knew when he was leaving town.
It's a good way to put the...
You guys see that? Isn't that weird? So for anyone that's not aware, she almost certainly tried to set up Jeff as a suspect. There's a lot of reasons to think this. He was due to leave literally minutes after Dan was killed. There's so many indications of that, listening to what Jeff relates in terms of how they broke up that week, and the fact that Wendy was so persistent in wanting to know that Jeff was definitely leaving on the Friday. And there's also the fact that this is the killer's car that these two drove up. Now, they were advised and helped to rent the car by Katie Magbanua. Katie Magbanua got all the directions from Charlie. He gave her the instructions and the picture of Dan in an envelope that he put in her purse. Told her, don't touch this. I've gone to my own measures to make sure I have no fingerprints on this, and you should do the same. So she gives it to Sigfrido Garcia on the right, and she helped them in terms of hiring this car. And this is the car that Jeff drove. It's not his actual car, but it's the same model, Nissan Sentra. And from what I hear, it was, you know, a similar color.
blame onto somebody else. You'd agree on that, right? If it happened, it would have been a good way to put the blame on somebody else.
I have no idea when he was going to leave town.
Your interview, July 18, 2014, you said, you know, my brother, he joked about hiring a hitman. Perhaps that was you just planting a seed to divert the attention of law enforcement away from you.
It was not.
Let's jump off topic right now and talk about your boys' names. That in the time after the murder, you changed their last name.
I don't want to delve too much into statement analysis and body language and things, but it's interesting that she says, I was not, or it was not, which I've heard being phrased as a kind of double negative, you know, rather than just denying it simply by saying it wasn't. The emphasis on the it was not sometimes is an indication of a lie. You hear that a lot from Peter Hyatt and the body language panel.
From Markel to Adelson, right?
A year later, yes.
Why?
I was scared
Of what?
of someone coming to attack them.
So it's a year later, you won't look at anything because you don't want to know what's going on in the case. And the thought is, well, they're going to be protected if they have my last name and not Markel, right?
Yes.
Now, years later, arrests are made. It's clear who committed the murder, Sigfredo Garcia Luis Rivera. The Adelson name has been dragged through the mud. Why haven't you continued to protect your boys and changed the name back?
I will be changing I'm not going to change the name back. I don't think that will help. One day I'll change all of our names.
The government asked you about immunity, so let's get into that. You explained that as an attorney, you understand that when the government gives a subpoena for somebody to testify, that it conveys immunity, right?
That's my understanding.
And just a heads up, she had this same derivative immunity that she has here in Charlie's trial. So nothing she says on the stand can be used against her, apparently, but it does not mean that she cannot be prosecuted for this case. And I think, from my understanding, that even what she says on the stand is perhaps open to be used if she's found to perjure herself. I'm not 100% sure on that, but that's my current understanding. But she has to be found to have perjured herself. And she could even just be prosecuted for perjury, right? As a last resort.
My knowledge of criminal law dates back to 2003 when I took a semester in law school, so forgive me.
Graduated law school, right?
This isn't my area of law.
When you clerked on the 11th Circuit, it was with Judge Jordan, right?
I did immigration appeals.
Yeah, but you still dealt with criminal stuff as well, too.
Very little.
She did, Red Eye. And remember, this is 2 years ago now. This is 2022. She says that she is going to change the kids' names in the future, but not back to Markel. You know, she's going to change all their names as a result of the Adelsons' name being dragged through the mud.
So your understanding, though, is it doesn't mean they can't arrest you. They just can't use what you say here against you later on. So you're protected.
Correct.
And you needed that to testify, right?
It's just given to testify. It's not a question of whether I needed it. It comes with testifying.
You fear being charged by them, so you need to have that protection of your words.
I don't fear being charged for a crime I didn't commit, no.
Now, y'all had this nice exchange where it was pleasant, but there's actually...
I don't know about you guys, but I think I would fear being charged for a crime I didn't commit. If I didn't commit it, I don't want to be charged for it. Weird phrase.
Tension between you and this office, right?
No.
They recently had your brother Charles Adelson arrested.
Tracy, she does currently have custody of the kids, yeah. And if so, will she change? She already changed their names to Adelson not long after the murder. Yeah.
Arrested, and he's in custody, right?
Correct.
For first-degree murder.
Correct.
And there's no tension?
It's very uncomfortable to be here. It's hard to tell where the tension is coming from.
They've discussed your involvement in this case. They insinuated it on the direct examination. There's no tension?
Lots of media insinuates that I did something I didn't do too. I can't feel tension towards every person in the world.
That's funny. I thought you didn't look at anything.
I don't. That's why.
But you know that you know about the media, but you don't know about the media?
I know about the media because it keeps me from from employment. It keeps me from lots of things in my life. I'm aware of what's there, but I don't read the minutia so I can sleep at night.
Ms. Adelson, 5 minutes ago you said you don't look at any of that stuff.
I
Now I
don't
asked you a
look at
question.
it.
Let me finish.
Sure.
5 minutes ago you say you don't look at any of that stuff. Now I ask you a question, you say you look at stuff.
That's not actually what I said. I said I'm aware that it exists, but I don't read it. I don't listen to it.
Then how do you know that they're bashing you?
You just told me they are.
I did?
Yeah.
How about this? We'll
See, what's happening here is she's actually enjoying this little joust with the attorney. You know, there's the overriding stress of what she must be going through just testifying in this case, right? Which is always overriding, that's the weather. But there's always these little pockets of moments, and right now, I think she's enjoying this little part of it. I know, right? Stop freaking smiling.
come back to it. You can think up a better answer, okay?
I'm not thinking up an answer. I'm telling you the truth. I'm sorry if you don't want to listen to it.
Your basic understanding of criminal law, though, you know that if the defense gives you a subpoena, you get no immunity.
Correct.
Correction, improper question.
I'm not going beyond that question.
All right, that's the only question you can ask on that.
If I give you a subpoena, you don't get immunity, right?
Correct.
Now, let's talk about your parents. The government asked you about your mother and father, Donna and Harvey, right? The government could do the same and subpoena them so that this jury can watch them get questioned, not nicely how Ms. Kappelman questioned you, but to be cross-examined by me.
Objection, improper question.
I'm going to sustain that. Ask a different question.
Are your parents here in Tallahassee right now?
No.
Are they back in Miami?
Yes.
Do they have any plans of coming here this week or next?
I don't think so.
Now, your family dynamic. It is your mother and father, Harvey and Donna. There's you, you're the youngest, Charles, and then the oldest, Robert. Right?
Correct.
And he's a doctor up in New York.
Correct.
Now, the government asked you about the relationship, and you're like, we don't talk much. It's actually much deeper than that with Robert, isn't it?
We don't talk
At all.
at all.
And the reason is because your parents were so difficult about the woman that is now his wife.
That is not the reason why we don't talk.
I'm not talking about the reason why you don't talk. Let me clarify it. The reason why your parents don't talk to him.
That's not the reason why they don't talk with him.
Are you saying to this jury that there wasn't a problem where they outright objected to his marriage of a woman that was not of the Jewish faith?
That was initially what happened, and then there was actually a beautiful reconciliation, and they're very happy about the marriage.
Robert and his wife, not your family.
Robert and his wife and our family were very happy about Robert's marriage.
So what happens is that Robert is in love with a woman. Your parents object. He breaks up with her and then dates a Jewish woman, right?
And then they got married and divorced, and then he got back together with the person he wanted to be married to. Yes.
With his true love.
Yes.
But there was a lot of tension in your family because of your family's involvement in the kids' marriages, right?
Yes.
So, can you take this is the second trial. It's a retrial of Katherine Magbanua. This is 2022. There's been 3 trials so far. The first was of Katie and Sigfrido Garcia. That was in 2019. The jury was hung on Katie in the first trial, and Garcia was convicted. The guy in the top right-hand corner took a plea agreement, so he's serving 19 years. And as I say, this is the retrial of Katherine Magbanua, 2022, and then Charlie went to trial last year, 2023.
Let's talk briefly about your children. The government had asked you in the topic of the Jewish faith, keeping kosher. You mentioned a bat mitzvah at one point in time. You're currently planning a bat mitzvah for your oldest, right?
No, it already happened.
Okay, now that is a very, Christopher, I'm obviously not Jewish, but my understanding is that it is a very, very important thing in the Jewish faith.
It's a very important milestone.
And for those that are very conservative in the Jewish faith, those that keep kosher, so to speak, it's even bigger.
I don't know that it's more important to one segment of Judaism over another, but it's an important coming of age ceremony.
It's where a boy becomes a man. Did you invite Dan Markel's parents, the kid's grandparents?
I did.
You invited them?
I invited them, yes.
When was the last time they saw face-to-face their grandchildren?
April 20th,
Of this year?
just now.
And you agree with me that it had been years since 2016 since the last time they had seen them?
The visit stopped when they threatened to put my children in foster care, yes. But up until that point, they did have visits.
But you got no problem letting them see your brother Charles, right?
I'm sorry?
You have no problem letting them hang out with your brother Charles, who's now sitting in custody for first-degree murder.
Well, they can't see him now, can they?
No, they can't, but I'll ask the questions. For years, they weren't able to see their grandchildren despite their pleading to you to see them. But you let them, let me finish, but you let them hang out with your murdering brother, right?
The children were permitted to see their grandparents. I cooked for them. We had play dates. They had sleepovers. When a letter surfaced that they were trying to have my children placed in foster care, the visits stopped. My brother never threatened to put my children in foster care, and if he had, the visits would have stopped with him too.
No, he just organized for their father to be killed. This is Dan's parents, along with Dan's sister on the left there. When Garcia and Rivera were named as suspects, and Garcia was arrested, Rivera was already in prison at the time, so he just had to be extradited. But when that happened, Dan's parents here inquired into foster options, in their words, looking into possibilities in the event that Wendy was arrested, because they were expecting Wendy to be arrested, obviously, right? So they looked into foster options, temporary fostering options. They perhaps were worried about where the kids would end up, right? Because Wendy's family is full of murderers. So you may think that's forgivable. And then when Wendy heard about this, she deprived them not just unsupervised contact, but any contact with the kids for 5-6 years. I think they eventually got to see the kids during the time of this actual trial that we're watching, but only when Wendy was testifying, and some think it was done for that reason. And apparently the laws in Florida have made it very difficult in terms of grandparents having rights. And as a consequence of this case, this happening, there was a law brought into being in Florida which is known as the Dan Markel law, which tries to help with grandparents' rights. So that just gives more context to what Wendy is actually trying to portray here.
You say you love your boys.
I do say I love my children.
Don't care about the father that they loved. What happened?
Never said that I don't care about the father that they
Then
loved.
look at some of the discovery and help figure it out.
Excuse me?
Then look at some of the evidence and help figure it out so that more lives aren't ruined by this.
I seem to not
Mr.
understand.
DeCosta, you need to ask a question now. You're making statements now. You need to ask a question.
Understood, Your Honor. If I could have one brief second to check with co-counsel. Ms. Adelson, we started this by saying that this is all about you. It started with you because of this marriage, right?
No. Well, you had tried to say that, but I don't agree.
Ms. Adelson, I'm going to make one final attempt through questions to implore you. You understand that you can't protect your brother Charles, who's going through this case, and protect yourself at the same time. You understand that, right?
I'm here to share the truth with you. I don't know how to answer the question.
Then please end the madness and share the truth. Will you please share the truth with this jury?
I've been sharing the truth since I walked in here. I've done nothing but share the truth.
You know what happened here, despite your claims to the jury that you haven't looked at anything, you haven't discussed with anybody, and you haven't confronted your brother. You know what happened here, right?
I do not know what happened here, and if I did, I would have shared it with the police 8 years ago.
You know that your brother went behind your back, don't you?
I do not.
Like he always does. This is something that he has always done, isn't it?
It is not.
You found out after that your brother had done this and gone behind your back. That's why you were throwing up at that dinner, right?
No, it's not.
You know that it didn't involve Katie either, right?
I don't know anything about...
If you're not going to say all of that and finally give the truth, why don't you just admit to this jury that you're guilty?
Because I'm not guilty.
A brief moment, Your Honor.
Yeah, this attorney is quite a contrast to Georgia, right?
Redirect.
So, listen, you were asked about the reason why you stopped contact for a period of time between your ex-husband's parents and your children.
Yes.
And you referenced a letter that you characterized as the grandparents threatening to put the children into foster care. Is that an email that was sent from the Markells to my office?
Yes.
Okay. And that was in reference to, in the event that you and the people that care for these children, who at the time were very young, were arrested, that the grandparents wanted to make sure, because they live in Canada, right?
They do.
They wanted to make sure that a specific organization could be contacted to care for the children so that someone was there to care for them until a relative could get there.
I don't
Right?
remember the bit about a relative getting there.
Okay, well, they weren't just going to leave them in foster care, right?
I don't know.
Okay. But the specific nature of the email, you will agree, was in the event that there's some kind of mass arrest, because they don't know who's getting ready to go to jail next, right? I mean, they're not privy to the investigation any more than you are, right? Law enforcement investigations, they're secret.
Sure.
Okay. And their concern, would you agree the concern ultimately in the email was for the care of the children?
The concern was to make sure the children were under good care, but as their mother, I know they're always under good care with me.
Right, but
And there's no
the
need for foster
email
care.
contemplated you not being available to care for them.
That's not possible.
Because it's not possible for you to get arrested.
Correct. Because I've done nothing wrong and I believe in our justice system.
Okay. Well, just wanted to clarify the nature of that. In this case, you were asked about, why aren't your parents coming to testify? You, as you mentioned, gave a police interview in this case, right?
Correct.
And consented to the search of your phone, etc. You gave testimony in this case, right?
Yes.
All right. And your parents did not, correct?
They did not give testimony.
They have not testified. They
They've
have
not
not
been
given a
asked to
police...
come testify, but they would if they were asked.
Okay. And have they given any police interviews?
They would have, but the police never contacted them.
The police did contact them, didn't they? And they refused.
No.
Are they represented by counsel?
They are represented by counsel.
And they'll come testify if we want them to.
If they are under state subpoena, just like I was, they would come testify.
All right.
Let me just translate what she's actually saying there. If they were forced to testify through subpoena, then they would.
And do you know what they would testify to?
They would testify to whatever they know.
And do you know what they know?
I have no idea what they know.
Okay. They've never told you.
No,
You've never asked them.
no.
Because you never had any conversations with them about this murder.
I've been advised by my counsel not to.
All right. So nobody, including your brother Charlie, has admitted or denied to you any involvement in the murder one way or the other.
Correct.
Same with your parents.
Correct.
All right.
Okay, guys. So there's there's two options. Either she knew about the hit or she didn't, right? I think almost all people observing this case think that she at least had knowledge of this. To what extent was she involved? Did she just know about it and did nothing about it? and gave enough of an impression to Charlie and Donna. Helped where she could, I guess. I mean, she literally texted Dan from Donna's house, clarifying when he was leaving on the Friday. The other possibility here is that she played an absolute blinder. I mentioned this on the last live, and Jamie has a theory that relates to this. That is it possible that she had knowledge of this, but played an absolute blinder to leave herself in the position that she's been in up to now, not being prosecuted? And did she do enough to gently maneuver law enforcement to her own family, to Charlie, through what she said in the interview, to leave herself, I guess, inheriting the crumbs of the empire? Is she capable of something that cold and calculating? Because she is now completely ghosting her family. Didn't have any conversations with her family because she was advised not to. Bullshit. Yeah. Many red flags.
One moment, please, Your Honor.
Okay.
And I guess the third option I didn't mention is that she really did not have any knowledge. Her family is so hideous that they did this behind her back. And unluckily for Wendy, there's all these red flags and all this circumstantial evidence that makes her look guilty. That's what you have to believe in her innocence here. And anyone honestly viewing all this and observing all this cannot come to that opinion, right? Having her proven guilty is another matter.
Nothing further, Your Honor. Thank
You
you.
want her subject to recall?
No, sir. She's free to go about her business.
All right, you're free to go. Thank you.
Let's watch her walk out after her performance, and then let's view.
All right,
Jeffrey
let's
this
put
moment.
Ms. Rodriguez back on the stand and complete her cross-examination at this point. Mr. DeCosta, you prepared for that?
Let's see what the poll results were. 79% think she will be arrested, 20% no. I actually expected it to be closer to 50-50, so that's interesting. So let's contrast that, guys, with what Jeffrey has to say.
The state calls Jeffrey Lacasse.
Jeffrey Lacasse, please. Good morning. Please go up to the witness stand. Before you have a seat, we're going to swear you in. Please raise your right hand, respond to the clerk.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Please have a seat.
Sir, please say your name and spell your name.
My name is Jeffrey Lacasse, Jeffrey Lacasse.
How are you employed, sir?
I'm currently an associate professor at Florida State University
How long have you been so employed?
since 2013.
All right, and I want to draw your attention back to 2014. Did you have a relationship with Wendy Adelson?
I did.
What type of relationship was that?
She was my girlfriend for about 4 months.
When did that relationship begin?
We dated in the fall of 2013, but casually we became a serious couple, I would say, around late February of 2014.
And when did the relationship end?
Well, that's a little tricky, but in July of 2014.
All right, and during the time that you were together with Ms. Adelson, did you become aware of her recent
Indeed,
divorce?
Pat, yeah.
I did. On our first couple of dates, that was the topic of conversation. That's in the fall of 2013.
All right, and did you get an impression as to what type of divorce that was or how it would be characterized?
An extremely contentious divorce.
All right, and during the time that you dated her, were you aware of any specific ongoing litigation with her ex-husband?
I was, particularly in February of 2014, because Ms. Adelson would react badly as that litigation proceeded. Yes, ma'am.
All right, and what specific litigation?
There actually is, yeah. He related this himself in his police interview that a lot of people had mentioned how similar that that Jeff and Dan looked.
Was the topic of discussion in your relationship with her?
Can you restate that, please?
What was there specific litigation that was the topic of discussion?
I recall a motion filed in February of 2014 where Danny had made some accusations that seemed serious, and Ms. Adelson reacted poorly. As a matter of fact, every time he filed something, she tended to react poorly.
Specifically, did you have knowledge through your relationship with Mrs. Adelson about a motion that had been filed by her ex-husband that was requesting that her mother not have contact with the children unless it was supervised?
Yes, I do recall that.
All right, and was that one of the items that she was really upset over?
Yes, there were many, but that was one for sure.
Okay, so fair to say she took that litigation or that filing very seriously?
Yes, she took every filing and every point and every motion very seriously, was my impression.
What about her mother, Donna Adelson? Do you have any personal knowledge as to how Donna Adelson took that particular filing about her having contact with the kids?
No, I do not.
Did you know Dan Markell?
I didn't know Dan Markell. I met Dan Markell on a handful of occasions for a few minutes on each occasion.
Any issues between the two of you?
No, I mean, he was my new girlfriend's ex-husband, so I was listening to Wendy Adelson describe him in terrible terms regularly. But in terms of us having an actual conflict, no, ma'am, never.
No negative words ever spoken between the
Oh,
two
no,
of
we
you?
were always very polite and cordial to one another when we interacted.
Were you specifically aware of the litigation concerning Wendy Adelson's desire to relocate to South Florida with her children?
Yes, that was a big topic of conversation on our first couple of dates, because it had just been denied a few months previous.
Okay. Why, if you know, did Wendy Adelson want to relocate to South Florida?
She despised living in Tallahassee and wanted to live in Miami.
And what was in Miami?
If you're in a new relationship, guys, even if the person's getting divorced and all they want to talk about is things relating to the previous relationship, then you may want to run.
Well, her parents, well, there's multiple reasons. Chief among those reasons would be the fact that her parents and brother were down there.
How would you characterize her relationship with her parents and brother?
Extremely close.
Did Wendy Adelson ever make a joke in your presence about her TV?
Yes, ma'am, she did. In October of 2013, the first time I had went to her house on Aqua Ridge, and we were going to watch a movie, she made a joke, which she characterized as her brother's joke, but she was the one telling it, that, her brother had looked into hiring a hitman, but a TV was cheaper. And I heard her repeat that joke on a later occasion.
All right. So you heard that joke a couple times?
At least twice, yes, ma'am.
All right. During your time in your relationship with Wendy Adelson, did you ever have any occasion to meet her family members?
Yes.
What family members did you meet?
Donna Adelson came in, I believe, October, November of 2013, and we had dinner. I spoke to her very briefly.
All right. Is that the only family member?
No, I also met Donna and Harvey would travel up here, and I would have very limited small talk with them because they took care of the kids when we would go on a date. But I didn't have a lot more interaction than that because it was sort of a secretive thing they seemed secretive in nature when we would return from one of those dates. Wendy Adelson would never invite me inside the house. And when we were all in a group setting, say at the circus or downtown Get Down, Wendy and I would talk, the parents would be over here, and they just never said much to me.
All right, so they didn't have too much interest in you, it seemed.
No, they were polite but cold.
Yeah, poor Jeff. The Adelsons family. Didn't think Jeff was good enough for Donna.
All right. And what about in Miami? Did you ever take any trips to Miami?
I did take one trip to Miami with Wendy in March of 2014.
And what family members did you spend time with on that trip?
We met with her brother, Charles Adelson, and we stayed at his house for one evening.
All right. And was that the same evening that you came to meet Katherine Magbanua?
Yes, we had dinner with Katherine Magbanua and Charlie Adelson prior to going to his house, yes.
All right. And this is in March of 2014?
Yes, it was during spring break. Wendy Adelson and I had went for alternative spring break, and it was Wednesday or Thursday of that week. We traveled to Miami to meet Charles. Charles Adelson was the point.
All right. And how was Ms. Magbanua introduced to you?
I don't recall exactly the word. It was clearly a dating relationship and a fairly new one. I couldn't tell you whether he said girlfriend or not, but it was a new romantic interest.
Of Charlie Adelson? Of
Charles Adelson, yes.
All right. So the four of you have dinner in Miami, is that correct?
That's correct.
And do you know the date of that dinner? It's okay if you don't. Definitely March of 14?
Yes, between like March 10th and 14th of 14.
All right. And so you had dinner with was that the only time you ever had any contact with Katherine Magbanua?
Yes.
All right. So you may not be able to identify her, but if you can, is she present in the courtroom today?
Oh, I can identify her. Katherine Magbanua.
Please point her out and describe what she's wearing.
Katherine Magbanua is sitting in a dark suit between her attorneys, who I recognize as Christopher DeCoste and Tara Kawas.
All right, thank you. Let the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant. When you and Wendy Adelson had dinner with Charlie Adelson and Katherine Magbanua, did you get the impression that this was the first time that Wendy had ever met Magbanua?
I got that rough impression because there was, I don't recall a great deal about that meeting, but I do remember some getting to know you talk that would have been abnormal if they had a long-standing relationship. So they were talking about their life situations and such in an introductory way. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And did Wendy at any time express to you any particular enthusiasm about this woman as opposed to any of her brother's other girlfriends?
Yeah, prior to the meeting, she seemed very excited about the fact that her brother was dating Katherine.
All right. And was that surprising?
Yes, a little bit. After dinner, it seemed a little surprising. It wasn't quite what once we had dinner, it wasn't quite what I had expected given Wendy's descriptions.
All right. And had you been through this with Wendy before? Your relationship was relatively new as well. Do you have personal knowledge about the way Wendy typically reacted to Charlie's girlfriends?
I don't recall exactly that. I don't.
Okay. Did anything unusual happen at the dinner?
Well, there's two things that stuck out to me. The first one was that Wendy Adelson had kind of a complex about being a single mom because Charlie had told her that no man wants to date a single mom. So we had this conversation repeatedly. Then I show up to dinner and Charlie's dating a single mom. So that was a little surprising. The other thing that... Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Specifically, did the fact that we talked about the fact that she's a single mom,
yes.
Did it come up any information about her child's father?
Yes, exactly. So that was the second thing that was surprising, that sticks out to me, is during that getting to know you small talk, Ms. Magbanua had mentioned that the father of her children had interactions with
I'm only going to object because this is a discovery violation. It's the first time I'm ever hearing of the statement of my client being made.
What's your objection?
It's a discovery violation under the Richardson hearing. I've never heard this statement of my client ever in the past 6 years of this case.
Did you have the opportunity to take his deposition?
Yes, and it wasn't mentioned.
All right. Well, if it's not asked, then he can't mention it. So that's overruled. You can proceed.
Mr. Lacasse, is this the first time you've ever mentioned this statement?
It is not.
Okay. When have you mentioned it before?
I talked to Investigator Isom between March and May of 2015 because he had called inquiring about Ms. Magbanua about a year and a half before she was arrested.
Okay. And you've previously given some testimony in this matter as well?
Wait, again, please.
Have you previously given testimony in this matter, the same case?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
And what statement if any, did Ms. Magbanua make about her child's father?
Yeah. So I cannot recall every exact word. I remember references to fighting, the word police, and that he definitely had a criminal record, which didn't sound like speeding tickets. It sounded serious.
Okay. And you never had the opportunity to meet her child's father, did you?
No, I never met him.
Okay. Did Charlie participate at all in that conversation?
We were all there. We were all engaged.
But he didn't specifically say anything relevant, like,
I don't recall
hey,
anything.
I know that guy,
No,
for
I
example.
did not say anything quite like that I recall. This is
Okay.
a dinner at, almost 9 years ago now. So, yeah.
I know. Do you recall who paid for dinner?
Charlie did.
And do you recall how he paid for dinner?
I do not.
All right. Do you know whether Charlie carried large amounts of cash?
I do not know if he carried large amounts of cash. Wendy mentioned the fact that he certainly stored large amounts of cash in shoeboxes in his home.
All right. And did you know, or do you know, whether or not Charlie Adelson runs a cash business?
That was what I was told by Wendy Adelson.
Okay. All right. So what happens after dinner?
After dinner, we go to yogurt, had a quick dessert, and then Miss Magbanua departed, and Wendy Adelson drove me to Charlie Adelson's house, at which point I do recall observing that she was unusually jittery and being strange. I didn't know what to make of it at the time.
And we're talking about Wendy Adelson.
Yeah, Wendy Adelson driving me to Charlie's home.
All right. So when you go back to Charlie's house, is it just you and Wendy and Charlie there?
Yes, as well as Charlie's then roommate, Jerome Obed, was there as well.
All right. And that's the dermatologist?
Yes.
Okay. And so during the time that y'all were hanging out at the house after dinner, did the topic of Dan Markel come up?
It did.
In what regard?
Well, he didn't go anywhere with Wendy without hearing about Dan Markel, so it wasn't atypical, but there was talk about the divorce, the post-divorce litigation. There was negative talk about Danny. I recall Charlie getting a little heated up in the hot tub about Danny.
So y'all were in the hot tub?
We were in the hot tub.
And Charlie was expressing some negative words against Dan Markel?
Yes, strong negative words. And I also had a constant stream of comments from Wendy about what Charlie thought, that Charlie hated Danny's, guts.
Okay. I want to talk about the incident that occurred at the coffee shop on June 4th of 2014. Does that sound familiar to you?
Yes, ma'am.
What happened at the coffee shop? Was that here in Tallahassee?
That was at Red Eye Coffee. I had met Wendy for a cup of coffee. I had an appointment in the same building later, so we just met up. And a couple of things happened on that day, but at the coffee shop, Wendy canceled a trip that we had planned for her to come meet my parents in California, which was scheduled for July 11th to 17th. And she said she canceled that trip because she was concerned we wouldn't get back in time to pick up the kids on the 18th, which didn't make a whole lot of sense. But
Yeah, this is another indicator that we don't always bring up, but the fact that there was a planned trip to California, as Jeff just said, for him and Wendy, and from the 11th of July to the 17th, the murder took place on the 18th, and as Jeff expressed, Wendy seemed really worried about getting back in time.
we then discussed rescheduling the trip. It wasn't anything I objected to strongly or anything like that, but it was weird.
The plan originally was for you to return to Tallahassee on the 17th?
Yes.
And then for her to take custody of her kids from Dan Markel on the 18th?
Yes.
Okay. And she canceled the trip because why?
Because our flight might get delayed in the middle of summer and we would get stranded and not be able to be there to pick up the kids, and she had to pick up the kids on the 18th.
Okay. Did you see her later that night?
Yes, I went to her house and hung out with her and her children that night.
All right. And was there anything unusual about her behavior on the night of June 4th, 2014?
Definitely. She was a nervous wreck. And I actually traveled to the store to buy her, I believe, some Pepto-Bismol because she was such a nervous wreck. She was having stomach problems. So she wasn't food poisoned. She didn't have the flu. She wasn't sick. She was just so nervous that she was having stomach problems.
All right. Tell us about the way the beginning of the end of your relationship.
Can you give me a date?
My understanding is there was a big fight on June 29th.
Yeah. So we traveled to Gainesville together. I had a work trip in Gainesville, and Miss Adelson accompanied me. And the relationship had been it'd been a huge roller coaster of up and down and love bombing, and I perceived a lot of manipulation and lying. And on, I guess it was the night, June 28th, that Saturday, we had a relationship conflict. We had I don't know if argument's quite the right word, but I was kind of tired of being strung along, and which is what it felt like. I couldn't figure out why I was being strung along, but that's what it felt like, and we sort of had it out.
All right. So when was the next time you saw her after the big fight?
Well, the next day we drove from Gainesville to Tallahassee. So I saw her then, and I dropped her off at her house. It was a very awkward, multiple-hour trip from Gainesville to Tallahassee.
All right. And did that feel like the end of the relationship at that time?
It wasn't great, but no, it didn't feel like the end. No, in fact, she said otherwise. I mean, I actually distinctly remember departing her house and her saying that this was not the end. But as I said, I felt like I was being strung along, where it was a constant roller coaster in a way that seemed purposeful and manipulative.
All right, so that takes us to June 30th of 2014, when you part ways after this sort of bad trip to Gainesville.
Yes, I dropped her off at her house on Aqua Ridge, and yeah, right.
When do you see her next after that?
I see her next July 13th, after she had spent 2 weeks in South Florida. We did have communications in that time period, but I didn't see her.
And was she in, do you know the dates that she was in South Florida?
She told me that the day after I dropped her off, which I guess is June 30th, that she had headed to South Florida and that she had returned July 30th. I don't know if that's true. That's just what she told me.
July 30th?
No, excuse me. June 30th to July June 30th to July 13th. Supposedly I was seeing her upon her return to Tallahassee.
Okay.
I just don't know if that's true. I don't know what day she actually got
Okay. She represented she'd been in South Florida, so you see her, so it's been a couple weeks since the big fight.
Yes.
And where did you see her?
I talked on the phone in the interim, and long story short, decided to keep going, to not break up, to continue to pursue the relationship. So we had a date. I picked her up at her house, and we went to the movies and dinner.
All right. And did you return back to her residence after your date?
I did. We did.
Was there anything unusual about her behavior that evening?
Well, she made a very strange statement to me at the house.
Tell us about that, please.
Yeah, so we're walking into the house and we're having chit chat, and she says, "Can I tell something to you confidentially?" And I said, "Sure." And she tells me that last summer, when the relocation got denied, Charlie investigated multiple ways to fix this problem of Danny Markel, including hiring a hitman, and that it was going to cost about $15,000. And I'm unsure if that number's 15,000 or 50,000 because they sound similar, but she told me that the previous summer that Charlie had looked into having Danny killed by a hitman.
All right.
So yeah, you have to believe that Jeff is lying, bold-faced lying here for Wendy to be innocent. There's just no other way around that. And it's we forget sometimes that Wendy, according to Jeff, told her this in confidence, right? And this is over and above the jokes about Charlie buying a TV instead of hiring a hitman.
So that would have been the summer of 2013.
Yes.
Okay. And when she told you this statement, you previously characterized the TV statement as a joke. Mm-hmm. Was this statement also in the characterization of a joke?
No, these are two discrete, completely different things. She had a joke she would make about a TV being cheaper than a hitman, I knew that joke. This was a separate statement. This was chilling. This wasn't funny. This made my stomach flip. I found it disturbing at the time. It's completely different.
And the statement was made 5 days before the murder of Dan Markell
That's correct.
by a hitman.
That's right.
All right, I want to talk about the next day, which is going to be July 14th, 2014, the Monday before the murder. Did you see Wendy Adelson that day?
I did. I had left the previous night by saying I had some hope for the relationship. I said, if this won't work out, just send me a text, and I won't be offended by that, and we'll just move on. But she contacted me the next day and said, I really want to spend time with you. So then she canceled plans in the middle of the day, and then we went to yoga.
You went to a yoga class together?
We attended a yoga class together, the most awkward yoga session in history.
Okay. What happens after the awkward yoga session?
Well, during the yoga session, just as a 43-year-old man that's been in a few relationships, I'm thinking, okay, this looks like this is over. The vibe I was getting. We walked to the car and exchanged words, and she didn't want to spend time with me Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and she had the whole week off without the kids. And then there was a couple other words exchanged, but it was clear to me it was, I thought it was over at that point, so I turned and started walking away.
Okay, and did she call you back?
Yeah, she called after me. I turned around, and she asked me, are you still going to Tennessee on Friday? Because she had previously known that I was leaving for a trip to Tennessee at 11 a.m. on Friday, July 18th. And she had a series of questions about whether I was going. If I didn't go, why wouldn't I go? She, despite seemingly just breaking up with me and not wanting to see me for the next 3 days, had a deep interest in what I was going to be doing on Friday.
All right, and your plan at that time was to leave Tallahassee by plane or car?
By car at approximately 11 a.m., and Wendy Adelson and I had discussed that in some detail previously because of other plans that eventually got canceled. But she was the only person aware, other than the people in Tennessee, that that's when I was leaving.
And had you followed that plan, is it correct that you would have been departing Tallahassee and getting on I-10 at approximately the same time that the killers were?
Hey, hi, Brad. Glad you're here. Hope you're well.
Yes, not only that.
Have you heard the news, Donna? Her trial date has been set for September the 30th. And I think Carol Steinbeck's going to be analysing that pre-trial in about 20 minutes, half an hour.
But I would have driven with it probably a couple miles of Dan Markell's house.
Right. And what type of vehicle would you have been in had you gone with that plan?
At that time, I was driving a 2004 four-door metallic gray Nissan Sentra.
All right. And are you familiar with the suspect vehicle in this case?
I am.
And would you characterize your vehicle as similar in appearance to that vehicle?
Yes, especially in profile, yes.
And are you aware that in her law enforcement interview, Wendy Adelson suggested you as a potential suspect?
I am aware of that.
And did you cooperate with the police in this case?
Yes. When I came back from Tennessee, they called me. I came in immediately and cooperated with them from the very beginning.
And were you able to provide an alibi that eliminated you as a suspect from committing this murder?
Yeah.
It's just crazy, guys, right? I mean, it's one thing, because Jeff, as he relates in his first law enforcement interview shortly after the murder, was mad about Wendy. It's quite something to discover later on that someone you're in a relationship with was doing the dirty on you or whatever, right? Or had betrayed you in some way. It's quite another to then realize that almost definitely that person was really trying to set you up for a murder. That's got to be a bit of a mind fuck.
Pretty solid when they had me on videotape at a Kmart in Tennessee a couple hours after the murder, using my credit card with my cell phone showing me there. So it was pretty good alibi.
And is that because you did not follow the plan to leave at 11 a.m. on July 18th?
That's right. I left the previous evening about between 6 and 8 p.m. I changed my plans. I didn't tell anybody except the people at the other end. I certainly didn't tell Wendy Adelson we weren't speaking, and so I was already out of the state by the time of the murder.
Do you have any knowledge about a celebration dinner that was had after the murder of Dan Markell?
I do. I eventually spoke to Wendy Adelson on the phone about 10 days after the murder. I had a couple of phone conversations with her. And in one of them, she described attending what Charlie Adelson described as a celebration dinner.
And was that the dinner where she vomited at the table?
Yeah, she said she hadn't eaten food in so long that as soon as the food hit her stomach, she started vomiting.
All right. And were these couple phone calls after the homicide the last contact that you had with Wendy Adelson?
Yes.
No further questions.
She never spoke to him again, face to face.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. I apologize, Mr. Lacasse. I'm going to have to read off my laptop for my questions. Okay. How are you doing today?
Good, how are you?
It's been a while since we've seen each other.
Been a while.
Everything all right?
Everything's good.
All right.
I guess, Black Eagle, what if this narrative is true about Wendy trying to set Jeff up as a patsy? The claim is that she was stringing him along intentionally, building him up, giving him hope, in order to drop him like a Led Zeppelin on the Monday, with the knowledge that he would be very upset by this. There'd be indications of how upset he would be, if investigators looked into him, and the fact that he was leaving literally minutes after Dan was killed. So he was being set up as being the, could this be the outraged, broken-hearted ex? That's the claim.
Okay. So, Mr. Lacasse, you are testifying
Murder.
today in this case under not only a state subpoena, but you received a defense subpoena as well, correct?
I did.
Okay. And you're testifying more specifically to explain to this jury what you know about Wendy Adelson, right?
Among other things, yes.
Yeah. And you were dating Wendy Adelson up until, you okay? Up until 4 days before her husband was murdered.
Yes, well, that's a little tricky because Wendy Adelson had sent me an email after that yoga date saying, I need to think about things for another week, so please don't contact me until the following week. So when the murder happened, I was in a state of limbo as far as the relationship, even though I had a pretty bad feeling that this was over. Obviously, it's not good to get an email like that, but for some reason she wanted us to be technically in limbo for another week, was my perception.
So it was kind of like a soft breakup, like it wasn't definitive, but hold on for a week until I get back to you kind of vibe.
Well, it was more, that's correct, ma'am, but it was more than that. It was bizarre because we just had 2 weeks apart to think about things, and I could not figure out why she would want to drag it out for one more week at the time.
And you'd characterize her behavior at this time as being strange, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you previously said that if there was someone aside from her parents that spent a lot of time with her leading up to the murder, it was you.
In the spring of 2014, yes, to my knowledge, yes.
Okay. And you had previously told the detective that during the 9 months you were dating, you were spending about 80 to 90% of your nights with Wendy, right?
I don't recall saying 80 to 90% of my nights. Wendy was frequently in South Florida, and frequently traveling for business and things like that. So Wendy wasn't even in Tallahassee 70, I don't know percentage of the time, but she was infrequently here, actually. So I spent...
Why didn't she say that at yoga? What specifically did she got?
A lot of time with her, but not so much in the fall, to be clear, and much more in January through June.
And would it be fair to say that any night that she didn't have the kids with her when she was free, she'd spend those nights with you?
A lot of them, not all of them.
Oh. And at that time you didn't have any kids of your own?
Correct.
Okay. And you saw firsthand how hard it is to be a single mother, right?
Oh, he has kids?
Yes.
Wendy. And Wendy's different because she has a lot of help.
When her parents were in town, she had a lot of help. When she traveled to South Florida, she had a lot of help. When she was on her own, it was sometimes difficult. Yes, ma'am.
And Danny, or Professor Markel, he wasn't an absentee father, was he?
No.
Not at all, right?
No.
So she also had him actively helping her out as well, too, with the...
Is the dad still free? Ice hockey. Are you talking about Charlie? Oh no, the Harvey, the dad of Wendy, you mean, right? The grandfather of the kids. He is still free, but he's been named as an unindicted conspirator. Just to comment on the Sarah Boone stuff in chat, guys. Tracy's asked me to weigh in on she may be more annoying than Daryl Brooks. Just my opinion. I'll let Rabid weigh in on that. Let me just say, if Sarah Boone was to end up defending herself, then she will be found guilty. It is not in her interest, obviously, right? But in terms of sheer entertainment value in true crime, we'd all love that, wouldn't we? And you can even make the argument that even if Sarah does get representation and goes on the stand, it's hard to see her being not found guilty as well. Which, if some of us who believe that she's not guilty of murder are correct, then that'd be an injustice. So from that angle, I would rather see her get representation, right, and not take the stand. But what we want and what we get are never the same thing in true crime.
Care of the boys.
Well, she had a standing offer from Professor Markel to see the children more often and to be more actively involved than was strictly, allowed by the court paperwork. Yes, if that's what you mean.
Did you ever get the feeling that Wendy...
Pussycat. So I think what she was doing there with the yoga thing, if this narrative is correct, is she was building him up, and then being extremely cold to him at the yoga. That was part of the increased manipulation. And then she sent the email either later that night or the next day, just to compound it, if that narrative's correct, it was a way of stringing him along without giving him certainty until her plan was in action.
She would use her children as almost like tools to get on Mr. Markel's nerves, or to,
Black Eagle, do you think she'd take a lawyer's advice and stay off the stand? I cannot imagine anything other than Sarah demanding to be on the stand, a bit like Jodi Arias. And it may well be, like Carmen the Chaos has suggested previously, that this may possibly be what's at the root of some of her problems with her previous attorneys. Her being advised that it's not in her interest to take the stand, and her not being happy with that. But that's just, we're just guessing at that point, right?
Second in any way?
I hate to say this about a mother, but I saw her doing that in multiple...
There's certainly no indication of that through her letters, is the point. But you can easily see in that being a problem with attorneys.
Multiple domains, including as bait for me. I mean, I saw her doing that in multiple domains, yes.
And you got close to the boys too, right?
Right,
I did.
Yeah.
And whenever we had a fight or a problem, Wendy always invoked the children. That was her...
her go-to excuse?
That was her way to continue stringing me along, it felt like, because I had grown very close to the children.
And let's talk about her parents.
Yes.
Now, they live in South Florida at the time, right?
Correct.
You ever made that drive before?
I made that drive a few times.
It's about 7 hours, right?
Yes, it's a drive.
A long, treacherous drive,
yes.
Right? Yes. And I only say that because Florida is just a very, not too much to see. It's just flat going straight for 7 hours, right?
Yes.
Okay. And isn't it true that her parents, anytime they would want Wendy to come down with the boys, they would drive up to Tallahassee, pick her up, and drive her back down?
That's what she reported. I want to be cautious because I know her to be a person that doesn't always tell me the truth, but that's what I was told. Yes.
Well, you just brought me into a whole new line of questioning.
Okay.
Okay. Let's talk about her ability to tell the truth.
Okay.
You know her very well. You were dating her for a long time.
Well, a few months, seriously, but go ahead.
How would you describe her when it's, trying to determine whether or not she's telling the truth?
I found her to be a deeply deceitful person and not that great at it. That was my impression.
Would she occasionally just put on a show, try to get people to feel sorry for her?
Wendy adopted the victim role as her default social role, her way of getting attention, sympathy, etc. Yes.
Did she play the victim role to you about how awful Danny was to her?
Yes.
And did she constantly complain about that, what a terrible person he was to her?
Endlessly, yes.
Okay, and this is, of course, the only information you're getting from this is through Wendy Adelson's mouth, right?
95% of it. I mean, I also live in Tallahassee. We have a community. I heard some other things. But she had managed to persuade most of the rest of the community that what she was saying was true at the time. So, yeah.
So, would you say she did that frequently? Like she'd speak openly about how upset she was with her divorce?
Yes, it was the topic of conversation. If we went to dinner with friends, that's what we were going to talk about. Frankly, it got old.
And she worked at the same place he did, right?
Yes, they both worked at the College of Law.
So she was disparaging him amongst his colleagues as well, too, right?
I can only, as far as what I witnessed, yeah, we went to dinner with some law professors where she did that, certainly.
And she'd actively talk badly about her divorce in front of them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, one thing that Wendy was very vocal to you about during their relationship was how much she hated Tallahassee, right?
Yes.
Okay. And that was almost a daily conversation, how much she hated living here.
Yeah, Danny was part one, how bad Tallahassee was part two. That was the plot of every day, basically.
And that's why you kind of say it started to get old, because those are basically the things that she would talk about over and over and over again.
Yes.
Okay. And she blamed Dan Markell for being stuck in Tallahassee. There's no question about that.
No, she did blame, well, she blamed Dan Markell for getting her stuck in Tallahassee, yes.
Had you ever heard her say that if something happened to him, she'd be able to go home?
Yeah, on that night that I related to Miss Kappelman, July 13th, part of that conversation was if anything ever happened to Danny, she would probably, she would return to South Florida.
July the 13th is the Sunday before the murder, and the yoga was on the Monday when Wendy played those games with Jeff.
Now, and that's actually what happened in this case, right?
It's exactly what happened in this case. A week later, yeah.
As soon as he was murdered, less than a week later, she was in South Florida.
That's my understanding.
Right. Now, you love living in Tallahassee, right?
I love Tallahassee, yeah.
All right. And you chose to move here from Phoenix.
I did.
Didn't she think you were crazy from leaving Phoenix, a bigger city, than coming here?
I don't know if she said I was crazy, but it was, I'll put it this way, it was not possible to persuade her that Tallahassee had some redeeming attributes, and also that this wasn't the rest of her life, that, at some point she would be able to leave when the children were older. That, it was a very immature sort of take on it.
And you tried sometimes to, highlight the wonderful things about Tallahassee to her, but was that a fruitless effort?
That was always unsuccessful. I mean, I did my best, but it was like talking to a wall. She wrote a book where she shreds Tallahassee. I mean, she really doesn't like Tallahassee.
Isn't it true that she thought that she was better than the people that lived in Tallahassee?
Yeah.
And did you ever catch her crying uncontrollably because she felt that she was stuck here?
Multiple crying episodes. Yes, she would cry sometimes because she was stuck here. She also used to cry, especially in the months preceding the murder, for no reason that I could discern.
It was just crying. Did you ask her and she just wouldn't give you an answer?
Yeah, that was Wendy's typical pattern, to be very non-specific.
Okay. And then, sorry, ask you these. Did Wendy explain to you that Danny was emotionally abusive to her?
She used that term very frequently, and at the time, as the boyfriend, I sort of accepted that.
You were taking what she said as true.
Yes, it's a new relationship. But in retrospect, I can't think of a single thing she ever described that I would consider emotionally abusive.
She did tell you once, though, that, well,
Yeah, I didn't realize you were making that connection, Black Eagle. That's a really good point, and it's something that I've been interested to see is the fact that Sarah Boone was a bona fide alcoholic. There's no doubt about that, and obviously that pattern has been deprived for what's coming up to being over 4 years now. So it's going to be interesting to see her in contrast to that, because anyone knows anyone that's gone through an addiction like that, it will completely alter someone's personality, right? They're under the control and spell of whatever the addiction is. So that's going to be interesting to, if we do get the chance to hear her on the stand, to see how she sounds, to see if there's a sense of responsibility and regret and guilt coming from her. I guess we'll find out.
she felt
Or maybe not.
this was emotionally disturbing to her, that Danny would make her sit in silence if they were to drive down to South Florida. She would drive, he would be in the passenger seat doing work, and that she would complain to you that that's something he would do, would make her sit in silence on the 7-hour drive.
Yeah, she said he did that one time, and I don't know if that's true or not, but she did say that, yes.
And to be clear, this is just coming from Wendy Adelson. You have no evidence to support that what she's telling you is the truth.
I don't.
Okay. Now, did she describe him as a complete control freak? I'm sorry.
That rings a bell.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did she ever describe him as an absentee father to you?
What she described was that during the marriage, he was not quite as involved with the children and arguably would meet that label. And then after the divorce, became very engaged with the children, which instead of seeing that as a positive, she saw as a rather annoying inconvenience that he wanted his share of the time with the kids.
Now, Wendy was in her mid-30s when you two were dating back in 2014, right?
That's right.
Would you describe her as being self-sufficient?
No, I think I described her in past police interviews as a highly dependent person who seemed to struggle with adult decision-making and would often seek advice on things that you might expect from a 15-year-old or an 18-year-old, but not a woman in her mid-30s. So that's right.
And did your relationship, Wendy...
Sarah Boone's trial is scheduled for May the 13th this year. But she's obviously, it's looking like she's lost her attorney, so who knows if that's going to stick.
With Wendy, was it so tumultuous that you actually ended up having to see a therapist about your relationship with her?
That's correct.
Would you also describe her as having a public persona, being one way in public and another behind closed doors?
Yes, superficially charming, but I had reported to the police that it's just a characteristic I found disturbing. We would have dinner with some people, the door closes, and people gossip, but it was like a 180 flip, and it would be vicious and very mean-spirited at a level that...
Completely different from how she was a moment before.
Yes, not a way I talk about people, yeah.
Okay. Now, and you'd say she's good actress, she's good at putting up a facade for people. Now, she's also admitted to you that she's lied in a deposition before, right?
Well, that's tricky because she may have lied about lying in a deposition.
She told that to you, right?
She did, but my understanding is she lied about that. So there's lies on top of lies.
So it could be a lie about a lie.
And maybe a lie about, yeah, it gets real confusing with, but it brings up an important point. She really enjoys mind games, and so I think that might have been a little bit of a mind game.
Oh, okay, so she may have just been throwing that out for some other ulterior purpose.
I don't know why she would disclose to me that she lied in a legal proceeding as an officer of the court and then turn out not to have lied in it. I mean, I got 100 stories like that.
No,
I mean,
and I would ask you, it would be as an attorney.
Yes.
I mean, it would be a violation of our ethical duties as a lawyer to lie on the oath, right?
Right, but then I go to the police in my first interview and I go, well, I really got one for you. She told me she lied in a deposition, and my understanding is she didn't. So there's a plotting kind of thing going on here.
All right. So have you previously described her as a pathological liar?
Yes.
Now let's talk
Jeff has no doubt.
about the one time that you came down to Miami
Yes.
and met Charles Adelson.
Yes.
Okay, so let's be clear. You met Charles Adelson once.
Correct.
You met Katherine Magbanua once.
Yes.
All right, and that was on that date that we talked about.
Yes.
All right, so let's talk about that. So,
Very true, Black Eagle. If anyone can get a life sentence because they're just obnoxious, it would be Sarah Boone. Yeah, indeed. That's her biggest problem.
because that dinner that night ended up getting a little strange when you guys went back to Charlie's house, right?
Yeah, that's fair.
Now describe for the jury, because they don't know anything about this restaurant. Describe Yardbird, because it's a restaurant that's on South Beach, correct?
Yeah, it's on South Beach. We were outside on a patio. You probably know Yardbird better than I have. Only been there once. It's a very nice restaurant.
They have all type of American-based food.
Yes. Yeah.
And you said something important. You were sitting outside.
We were sitting outside.
Okay. You and Wendy got there before Charles, right?
That sounds right, but I don't remember for sure.
Okay. And if if we had text messages between, for example, Charles and Wendy that would indicate you guys were outside, those would be reliable, waiting for them to get there, right?
I mean, that sounds right.
Okay. And he meets up with you there, and then Katherine meets up, and that's when you guys get introduced.
Right.
You remain outside while you're having dinner, right?
Correct.
Okay. And would it be fair to say, I mean, I know what Yardbird looks like, but the members of the jury do not. So where the patio is, it's right at a four-corner intersection, if I'm saying that correctly.
Mm-hmm.
So there could be cars across the way, correct?
Yes.
Cars parked to the right, cars parked to the left.
Yes.
But you're all clearly visible sitting down outside, correct?
Oh, sure. Yes.
Okay. So
yes.
you're sitting there with Wendy,
Yes.
and Charles is sitting beside Katherine. Was he behaving as if, that's his girlfriend and stuff like that?
Well.
And I'm only asking because, if someone from the outside were just watching, would it appear that she was having a good time with her boyfriend?
I mean,
yeah.
It's a hard question for me to answer because it's been so long.
Yeah.
I agree, Pussycat. Yeah, she would not be his type, just his personality.
It does. You'd have to know Charlie. I mean, I don't know how. I met him the one time. Most of this dinner was Charlie informing us about the world. He's talking a lot. So I don't know how he acts with girlfriends or women he's dating. But go ahead.
And that's kind of important because it's the first time you're meeting him, right?
Right. Tell
the jury how much he talks.
Oh, you don't talk to Charlie Adelson. He wasn't to Charlie Adelson. I mean, I never say anything quite like it.
Right? Isn't he dominates the entire conversation?
He dominated that conversation. I don't remember what was said at that conversation, but there was interaction in that conversation. There was other people talking. I mean, I don't want that to be taken too far because Charlie was certainly a character and someone I had a bad feeling about immediately, honestly, but it wasn't like 99% was just Charlie talking.
Yeah, of course.
Him and Kitty were relating things they had done together. I don't remember the specifics 8 years later, but yeah.
And you had said on direct examination, he introduced Katie to you as his girlfriend.
I don't remember him saying the word girlfriend.
But like you said, he was talking about how things that they had done before, that it was obvious to you that they were dating, right?
Yeah, and then it was fairly new, yeah.
Okay. It wouldn't be too smart for him to be introducing people if he's conspiring them, right?
Can you restate that?
It wouldn't be very smart of him to be introducing someone he's conspiring with to commit murder to other people, right?
I mean, I'm not an investigator. I'm not an expert on what's smart when conducting a criminal conspiracy.
So let's talk about now so you're all sitting outside. It was nighttime, right?
Very early evening. This was like a pretty early dinner. The sun was still out.
Okay, but going into evening, kind of like how the sun here, like it doesn't, especially around this time, It doesn't set
between 4 and 6. I don't remember exactly when.
Okay, so it wouldn't be any problem if anybody that was around to be seeing you guys having dinner.
No, sure.
You leave that restaurant and then you all go collectively to get some ice cream.
Yeah, but
Yogurt.
I don't have real clear memories of that, but we walked to a yogurt place, and that wasn't very long, and then we headed to Charlie's house.
Now, how did you guys get to Charlie's house? Were you and Wendy in the car by yourself?
Wendy had driven a rental down from Tallahassee, and she was driving.
So Charles got into his own vehicle and drove and met you back at the house?
Yes.
Okay. And so you and his house is in Fort Lauderdale, correct?
Yeah, he's on Well Harbor, that's right.
So it would be at least a 14-minute drive, 45 minutes. Just if you can remember. It's not a quick 10-minute
No,
drive.
it wasn't like 5-10 minutes. It was a ways.
Okay, and then so you go up to the house and you and Wendy go inside, right?
That's right.
Now, Katherine doesn't come back to Charles's house, right?
No, Katherine returned to her own house.
She went back to her own home.
Yeah.
But then Charles comes back and then you, Charles, and Wendy all sit down in the hot tub.
Right, I think we talked otherwise as well, but we spent a couple hours in that hot tub, yeah.
Okay. And this is where I think you said this is when he starts talking about some very weird things, right?
Yes.
Okay. He was very braggadocious, is a word you've used?
He was.
And wasn't he kind of like talking about inappropriate, for example, he was talking about inappropriate sexual things he's done with girls, was one of the things he talked about, right?
Yeah, that one in front of your sister, yeah, I was fairly stunned by him talking about sexual sadism in front of his younger sister, yeah.
You're sitting right there, he's kind of talking to you, but this is things he's discussing in front of his sister, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then he also talked about going on trips and sleeping with young girls in other countries, right?
Don't think that was in the hot tub. That was information related from Wendy to me during the relationship.
Okay, sorry, I apologize. But she was aware of that. Like, she's telling you how her brother is? That he goes to other countries and sleeps with really young girls?
Yeah, and she's supposedly a human trafficking activist, so it's pretty bizarre.
Okay. And he also talked to you at this, and in this hot tub, when you guys are talking, did he come across as being like, trying to brag that he was a person that has friends on two sides of the tracks?
Yeah, that's a nice summary overall. I don't remember a lot of the specific details, but he was more street smart or more street, if you know what I mean by that I would have expected from a millionaire Miami dentist, yes.
Okay, and was he doing that more in the hot tub than how he was when he was at dinner with everybody?
I don't remember much of the dinner, so I can't really make a comparison.
Okay, but the hot tub incident kind of stands out.
The hot tub stuck out, yeah.
Okay, and did you describe him as being very cocky, arrogant, and narcissistic?
Yes.
Okay. And he also talked about and this is the first time he's met you. He was talking about what he does with his finances, right?
Yes, he was bragging about financial crimes, essentially.
Basically like, I'm a dentist by day, but I also dabble in these other things that I'm not supposed to.
Yeah.
And was bragging to you about that.
Yes.
What kind of impression did that leave with you?
Well, when Danny Markel was murdered, I went to the police immediately and said, you need to be investigating Charles Adelson. I said that on the 3 days after he was murdered. So.
And that is what I wanted to talk to you about. So, when you only met him once, and the first time that you heard that the police wanted to talk to you, you immediately... Now, let's talk about that. How did you find out that the police would like to ask you some questions about what's going on?
I was called, he was murdered on July 18th.
Right.
I was on my way back down south to Tallahassee, and I received a call from TPD asking me to come in, and I actually drove straight to the station.
When they called you on your phone, and did they identify themselves as
Yes.
the Tallahassee Police Department?
Yeah, Investigator Corey Hill.
Okay. Okay. And he actually said, I'm with the Tallahassee Police Department, and we would like you to come in and answer some questions, right?
Something to that effect.
Did they tell you what it was about?
I don't recall, but I don't know that he needed to.
Okay. Oh, had you heard already what had happened?
Yeah.
Okay. So you immediately went there, but they kind of like, gave you the option and invited you to come in, right?
They didn't
go and arrest you.
They did not arrest me.
Okay.
No.
And when you first came into your first meeting with Corey Hill, he started out the meeting by saying, hey, listen, we're working to exclude you as a suspect.
Yes, we had a conversation about excluding me. And the impression I got was that, and I guess I've worn a sense that they already done some investigating, of my cell phone and so forth, so that the investigation of me had reached a point where that was just, that we're at the point where they were trying to exclude me. That's right.
Now, they haven't heard from you yet, right? They haven't heard from you yet. Like you haven't provided them any information yet.
No, they haven't. But my cell phone shows me in another state when he's murdered. So.
But at that time, though, you hadn't realized Wendy had kind of named you or implied that you could have been a suspect in this case, right?
I didn't realize that when I was heading into the station. By the time I left the station,
so it was pretty clear.
I mean, no one said that word for word, but I'm not stupid, and I could tell pretty quickly that, yeah.
You'd agree with me. People don't have to say things directly sometimes. You can just leave little crumbs, and you can pick up on what they're trying to get at, right?
I mean.
Yeah, Black Eagle says, I am curious how they found Wendy at Mosaic Restaurant. Do I know? No, I don't actually. I presume law enforcement made a few calls, perhaps even to Wendy, and she told them where she was. But no, I don't know for sure. Yeah, this testimony is interesting hybrid, isn't it?
Yeah, sometimes, and
especially put in contrast to Wendy's testimony.
I mean, I'll say this: I was never quite sure until I was able to view Wendy's interrogation video, in which case it became 100%.
Okay.
I suspected that previously. I thought maybe, but once I saw her video, there it is in black and white. So.
Now, even though now you know they considered you as a suspect, you walked into a room at Tallahassee Police Department, correct?
Yes.
And they reported you, right?
Yes.
I mean, now we don't have to go back in 2014 to wonder what it was that you said.
Right, I guess.
It's there in not black and white, but in color. So.
Yeah, my first interview was video recorded, the first interview I did with them, yeah.
So was the second one, right?
You mean the one on the 21st?
I have July 21st, July 23rd, and March 6th.
Yeah, so I had a videotaped interview the 21st. I had a videotaped interview the 23rd where I came back and added Wendy to the list of people I thought they should be investigated.
Okay. But on that first day, even though you'd only met him once, you thought it was imperative for you to tell these detectives, if you're going to look at someone, you need to look at her brother.
I did that reluctantly. I was worried about my safety, but I did. That's right. That's correct. Yeah.
You were even in that point, even though you'd only met him one time, asked if you could speak to them off the record, right?
Yeah, I got a feeling about Charlie. I had a bad feeling.
And explain to the jury, it wasn't that, I want to tell you something that, may be bad for me. I'm scared that Charlie may come back and do something if I call him out.
Yeah, it's also just caught in the crosshairs of a criminal investigation, which is like being thrown into a weird movie. It's a very bizarre sort of thing. I didn't know how realistic that threat would be, but I thought Charlie was potentially a dangerous person.
And this was, like I said, and I'm going to stress it, only after meeting him once.
Yeah, about 4 hours is all it took.
Oh, 4 hours. All right. So now going back to, I want to talk about those dates leading up to when you guys, when Professor Markell was murdered.
Yes.
So you talked about the trip to Gainesville, and this is when things started to get weird with the fighting between you and Wendy, correct?
Correct. That's when the big disagreement was, yes.
Okay, and then on the drive back, you had described that as the most awkward drive ever?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, Pussycat, the owl in the staircase case, right? With, what's his name? Michael Peterson? Yeah, he got lucky with that Alfred play. So, for anyone that's not aware, Wendy wore this shirt to the police interview on the day of the murder, and she has an owl on the shirt. And one of the hitmen, I think it was Garcia, whose nickname was Tuto. One of the two of them. And the nickname Tuto is derived from the Latin for owl. And on the day of the murder, this day, they one of them posted a picture of an owl that they took on their journey. So that's a little eerie. And then you've got the fact that she has the book with the blue eye. Yeah, that's the owl And then you've got the bourbon that she purchased after going to the crime scene for an apparent stock the fridge party later on. This Bullet Rye, obviously with the name, it's a bit weird. I still like to know what her plans were though that evening, right? Because she was supposed to have the kids later on, pick them up from preschool, from what I gather. So what was did she have a babysitter for the kids? It's not something I've really looked into yet.
And so you return to Tallahassee, and the next day she leaves to Miami.
That's.
Also, Luis was Tuto. Okay. So Luis Rivera was the driver.
What you told me she was doing, yeah. I assume that happened.
So on July 1st of 2014, she would have been in Miami, as best as you can recollect.
Yes.
Okay. And all the way up until July 13th.
Yes.
All the time she's texting with you, communicating with you while she's in Miami, right?
Yeah, we had 5 to 10 communications, some phone calls, some video chats with the kids. She was cleaning out her childhood room in Coral Springs. I remember video chatting with her and the kids. So yeah, that's right.
Nothing in those communications indicating to you that something was amiss? That you was going to probably come back and the next day ask to take a week break?
Oh, I mean, we had some heart-to-hearts. I got these long emails. She kept, this is what I'm talking about, being strung along. This is what I'm referring to. It would make sense if the big fight you break up. It wasn't like that. I'm getting texts that say, I miss you. I'm getting 1,000-word emails. We're having video chats with the kids. We're on the phone, and it seemed like we were going to work things out, which is why that breakup date is so hard to pin down.
Which is why it was so odd to you.
It's extremely strange.
So she gets back to Tallahassee, and on the Monday before Dan Markel is killed, that's when you guys have dinner, right?
What's the calendar date, ma'am? I know it is the 13th.
The 13th.
The 13th is the dinner.
I'm sorry, I tried to go back 5.
Yeah. So that's, July 13th we had dinner and saw a movie. That's correct.
Okay. And you watched the movie Neighbors.
We did.
Excellent movie. Okay. And another thing she did that was, and you had spoken to the Miss Kapperman about this, is that she specifically, after you guys broke up, or after the yoga session on the Tuesday, that she specifically asked you about your travel plans on Friday.
That's correct.
Okay. And you actually thought that was strange because you're getting the vibe that we're breaking up, but now you're asking me where I'm going to be on Friday at 11 a.m.
Which is why I went to the police on July 23rd and highlighted that as the first of many suspicious things I thought they needed to know.
And you'd agree with me that at the time when you first spoke to the police, and I mean it's common sense, that your memory of the details of everything that went on in 2014 were better in 2014.
Mostly, although I also, mostly.
Like if we went into details about what you did Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, you'd know back then better than you do now.
As far as memory, yes, but I also reviewed all my text messages and emails when I came back to talk to the police a few months later, and that did raise things that I did not remember in July.
And so you would agree with me that first time you probably weren't properly equipped to give them all the details. You needed to go back and review things, right?
I think I gave them the important details on those first 2 days, which is Charlie and Wendy Adelson need to be investigated, but there were other details that I uncovered as I thought about it. It's also a pretty traumatic situation. It takes a little bit to get your head on straight, to think straight, obviously.
Now, so you leave Thursday, but you never tell Wendy that you're leaving on Thursday, right?
No, I did not.
So as far as she knew, you were leaving on Friday at 11 a.m.
Yes.
All right. And you'd agree with me that had it not been for your credit card receipts, the Walmart video, and other things, you probably could be sitting at the table between two lawyers, right?
I mean, if I had left town without a cell phone, not entered a store, not used a credit card, things could have been more complicated. But this was in 2014. It's a pretty unlikely scenario, it seems like to me. I worried that there was an effort made to, make it look as if. But there was also
he does
10 other reasons that would have, that word exculpatory. There's 10 other reasons why I couldn't have done it that we didn't even have to go to because we had this videotape of me at a Kmart.
You didn't even have to go there because they gave you the opportunity to give everything over and for you to, explain your side of the story, right?
Well, they filed search warrants. It wasn't, I mean...
They got a search warrant again?
Did
they tell you that before they spoke?
My understanding is they had search warrants for cell phones and financial records, or some sort of court paperwork. I'm not a lawyer, but it wasn't as simple as I show them your cell phone and you walk away. I showed them that to show, look, I didn't do it, and they did additional investigation after that.
Okay, but you'd agree with me that had you had to get those things, I don't know, maybe 2-3 years after, they may have disappeared. There probably may not have been a video. If your cell records, for example, if you have Sprint, they only hold them for 2 years, right?
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, this is a screenshot of the actual footage of him in Walmart, and that's the receipt.
I don't know anything about that.
Okay, but at the time is when you probably should be gathering as much evidence as possible before, it goes stale or expires, right?
Again, I'm not a criminal investigator, and
I'm only asking based on common sense.
Well, I hope I have some common sense. I mean, but maybe I don't. I'm a college professor. It doesn't always go together. That sounds right, but I worry that I'm giving you opinion based on no expertise on law enforcement or investigations whatsoever. I want to stick to what I know.
No, and I appreciate that, Mr. Lacasse, because I don't want anything to come across. I
I'm
want
not
to
an
be able to
expert.
explain 100% to the jury. Now, another thing I wanted to make clear is that statement, the joke that Wendy made about, oh, my brother had joked about looking into hiring a hitman but got me this TV as a divorce present. It was cheaper, right?
Well, that's the joke, not what I would call the chilling statement.
Right. I'm talking about the joke.
Yes.
She told you that he said that the summer that they were divorced, right?
Say that again, please.
That would have been in the summer of 2013, correct?
I don't know when the joke started. If Wendy told a joke once, she was one of those people you probably hear it 10 more times. So I don't know how long she's been telling that joke, how many times she told it.
But you'd agree with me that based on what she's saying to you, that it would have been around the time of the divorce that he made that representation.
I just don't know when she started telling that joke, although I heard it for the first time in October of 2013.
Okay, and you have no idea when he met Miss Magbanua, right?
Who's he?
Charlie.
No, I don't know when they met.
And that one time that you were sitting there with Charlie, did he at all, I think you had mentioned it, he was vocal too? They were talking about Dan Markel in the hot tub?
He made some comments about Dan Markel that I can't recall word for word, but it was clear he was not a fan, that he was very upset with Dan Markel. Yes.
Now, when you said Katie had referenced talking about her ex-husband, right? Or ex-boyfriend, however she referred it, father of her kids.
Yes, she and I recounted the little that I recall, which is that
of course.
He had a criminal record and the word fighting, the word police, and that's all I remember. It seemed fairly serious.
Did it come across that she was still with him, or was she speaking about him like he was her ex?
I don't think I know the answer to that question.
Okay, and that's a fair response.
Yeah.
I'm just asking what you remember.
I'm trying to separate what I know from what I've heard since, and I don't think I would know.
Okay, and
Yeah, Black Eagle. See, this is what I mentioned at the beginning of this live. I did get a message giving some pushback in regard to my take on Jeffrey Lacasse. And it's clear that there are a certain proportion of people that do not like Jeff and make all sorts of allegations that I've not looked into yet. But it's things like, is it possible that Jeff just wanted to bury Wendy because he was so heartbroken and this was revenge, and then because he found out that she tried to set him up, is this the reason for this? But I just do not see it. I really don't. I mean, watching all his interviews and all his testimony, it's just too believable. He so naturally relates what he has to say. but I'll certainly look into what's being claimed and perhaps address it next time.
Things she had said was he has a criminal record, issues with the police. Did she mention anything about the fact that he was on drugs? Anything like that sound familiar?
You know, I really wish I could remember every word
course.
from that conversation. It seems important now. I can't. But to your prior question, clearly Charlie was dating Katherine now, so I didn't get the impression that.
Yeah, but I bet he's glad that his testimony could sink her. Yeah, it just could be here that almost definitely those things align, that he would have been devastated by finding out, you know, that Wendy had tried to set him up, and he was genuinely heartbroken, and that probably would support him enjoying being able to tell the truth about Wendy. You know, I think it's just a case that these things align here. But you're always going to get people that want to dig deeper and try and find something a little bit more sensational in true crime.
She was still with the father of her children, but there was some sort of ongoing relationship due to the kids in custody, and there was a mention of some kind of court thing. I don't know what it was. So there was obviously still some sort of social connection, but I don't think they were dating.
Kind of like Wendy and Danny, right? Like if we were to look at, you know, your phone records and Katie's phone record, not Katie, and Wendy's phone records. At the time you were dating her, right? She'd be in constant communication with you, correct?
Oh, well, that's funny. Wendy was notorious for not returning texts or phone calls. So,
but there'd be a lot of communications from you to her, though.
No, there would be communications both ways, to be fair. Sure. I don't know what you would consider a lot, but yeah, we're dating. There's going to be communications.
And there should be communications between her and the father of her kids, right?
That was an issue I think that was actually headed into court on what basis that was allowed, when he could text her. They had a parenting coordinator. She was protesting. So I think I don't have personal knowledge of that. That was actually a contentious issue, is how much should he be allowed to contact her was an issue in contention.
He wanted more, but it didn't suggest that he had no contact with them, right?
No, not that he had no contact, but she wanted as limited contact with him as possible, given that they were divorced. And I think Professor Markell was trying to be more collaborative as, you know, co-parenting in that situation. So I remember situations where she would get a text.
Something else that Tamara pointed out, and I've heard stated elsewhere, is that Wendy would never give Dan first right of refusal to look after the kids when it was her turn. Apparently Dan always would, but Wendy would go completely out of her way to avoid giving Dan the kids in a situation like that. She would rather have a friend drive up from Miami, apparently, than give him that right. And Dan knew about this, and it was a big bone of contention between them.
And very upset that he texted her, for example.
Do you recall anything unusual about Charlie when Katie was talking about her ex?
No.
Did he say anything like, I don't know that guy?
I wish I could remember that conversation. I told you everything I could remember about that conversation.
All right. Can I have one more here?
No.
Apparently, Garcia could not stand Charlie. There was a moment that was referenced where I think they were in a car together, Charlie and Katie, and Garcia was making threats outside the car. He was apparently very jealous of Charlie for a lot of reasons. Garcia was the father of Katie's kids. They were on and off in their relationship.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lacasse. Good to see you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Hold on 1 second. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Lacasse, you were asked about the dinner. We talked about it on direct as well, where you met Katherine Magbanua and Charlie Adelson for the first time.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, and they appeared to be dating at that time.
Yes.
Okay, and Can you tell us the date, or is there anything that would refresh your memory of the date of that dinner?
It was during spring break 2014,
Okay, so sometime in that.
like March 10th to 14th. Honestly, I think I've said it before. I've just forgotten it today. I apologize.
That's okay. I just wondered if there was anything that you could look at that would refresh your recollection on the specific date, because I think you have said before.
I think I have said it before. I don't know where.
Okay. All right. And when you departed the dinner, you went to a vehicle and Mr. Adelson went to his vehicle. Were your vehicles in close proximity to each other, or was he parked somewhere else where you couldn't see him?
I couldn't see his vehicle. I've been asked that before because Wendy Adelson and I had arrived in that area hours earlier. We're kind of walking around looking at shops and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't remember the parking arrangement, but I don't think we were parked right up against it compared to them.
Okay. And once you returned to your vehicles, you returned to Mr. Adelson's residence. Is that right?
Correct.
And did you say you spent the night there that night?
I did. I flew out the next morning.
Okay. And when you arrived at Mr. Adelson's restaurant, you just traveled straight from the yogurt to his residence, right?
Yes.
And is that what he did as well, as far as you know?
I have no idea.
Was there a delay? Were you there for some time before he arrived back?
I don't recall.
Okay. When he arrived back at his residence, I guess once you got there, did you have to wait for him to let you in? Were you waiting outside for some time?
That could be true, but I don't recall it.
Okay. When he did arrive, did it appear that he was shaken or upset about something?
I don't recall that.
Did he have any obvious injuries? Did it appear he'd been in some type of physical altercation?
I don't recall any of that. No.
Is that something you think you would recall?
I think so. I mean, he was the same in the hot tub as he was in dinner, only more so, if that makes sense. It wasn't a slide towards a negative direction or injuries or anything like that. It was like he was holding forth even more once he got home. It seemed like more of
jovial.
Say again.
Jovial, outgoing, talkative.
Very gregarious, hyperverbal is what we call it in clinical work. Hyperverbal.
All right. And during his hyperverbal session of word vomiting all over the hot tub, did he mention that he had just been in an altercation of some type in the parking lot of the restaurant?
No.
Is that something you would have remembered?
I think I would have remembered that.
Is there any connection between you and the people that killed Dan Markell?
No.
You weren't on the wiretap, were you?
No.
You weren't captured at all on the wiretap?
No.
Judge, I'm going to object to the outside the scope across.
Overruled.
You were asked on cross-examination about your alibi, right?
Yes.
I know if you didn't have that alibi, you might be a suspect in this case, right?
Yes.
Well, you don't have any connection to the killers, do you?
0.
All right. And you talked about the joke about hiring a hitman. It was made in 2013.
Yes.
And the chilling statement about Charlie's serious interest in hiring a hitman was made to you 5 days before the murder, correct?
Correct.
And it was referencing that he had done that in 2013.
That's right.
All right. But obviously, was the murder of Dan Markell accomplished in 2013?
No. Danny lived throughout 2013 and through half of 2014.
All right. And it was accomplished in 2014.
That's correct.
When Charlie Adelson was dating who?
Katherine Magbanua, that's correct.
No further questions.
All right. We can release a witness?
Absolutely, Black Eagle.
Okay. You'll remain under subpoena. They'll let you know if you need to testify again, okay?
Thank you, sir.
But you're free to go. Thank you. All right, we're going to take our lunch break now. I apologize. We have gone well over the noon hour, and we're almost at 1 o'clock. So I'm going to give you until 2 o'clock, and we'll start promptly with the testimony at that time.
Yeah, so there's Kay Magbanua, just to the left of the attorney that just stood up. Her, the female attorney that you would have heard speaking there on the during this testimony, her and her assistant just behind Katie, they were literally in tears at the verdict here in this. Because as far as I'm aware, Katie, on the advice of these attorneys, rejected a good few plea agreements to cooperate in the investigation, which she did not. She rejected those. And then, as I said earlier, ended up cooperating regardless for Charlie's trial.
Please, again, no discussions with each other or with anyone else or any news reports or access the internet about the case. We'll see everybody back at 2 o'clock to start with the testimony at that time. Okay? Thank you.
All right, there you have it. Very interesting, and I think it's interesting to be showing these testimonies in contrast. Katherine Magbanua. All right, guys, that's all I have there for tonight for you guys. Do check out, I should say Carl. Do check out Carl Steinbeck's channel. He's doing a live right now, actually. I'll need to go back and watch that. He's reacting to the pre-trial of Donna today. As I said, she's due to go to trial September the 30th this year. So hopefully we have Sarah Boone to look forward to in the interim. Thanks, Suzanne. And I will, I do want to mix it up a bit and speak about a few other cases coming up as well, but I'll definitely be concentrating on this case. Next, I think I'll be going through the through Charlie's trial. And perhaps go back and watch some of Katie Magbanua's cross-examination. That is something else. All right, so thanks again, everyone, and I shall see you guys next time. In a few days, I would say. Good night, everyone.